All right, good morning. We'll just give a few minutes for our attendees to filter into the webinar room before we get started. Okay, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Anthony Orlando. My pronouns are he, him, his, and I am the Assistant Dean of Admissions at Western New England University School of Law. It is my pleasure to welcome you to our Diversity Law Day. This is an event that we've held in conjunction with the University of Connecticut School of Law, Boston University School of Law, and New England Law Boston for over 15 years. I just want to take a moment to thank my wonderful admissions colleagues at those schools for their work in planning this event. Lauren Majorowski at UConn Law, Chloe Matthews at BU Law, and Ann Hoppy at New England Law Boston. As admissions professionals, all of us, as well as our speakers today, acknowledge and celebrate the importance of diversity in legal education and the legal profession. And we're so happy that all of you could join us for today's event. Today, we'll hear from Angela Winfield, Vice President and Chief Diversity Officer at LSAC, the Law School Admission Council. We'll then hear from current students at each of our schools about their activities and experiences. Next, we'll hear from Ashley Norwood-Strupa, the Northeast Regional Director for Access Lex, with important information about financing your legal education. Following, we'll hear from some of our alumni about the transition from law school to practice and other professional opportunities. And last, but certainly not least, we'll hear from our deans at our respective law schools for their remarks on the importance of diversity in legal education and the legal profession. A couple of quick housekeeping items. First, please keep your microphone on mute throughout the presentation, but feel free, if you would like, to turn your cameras on. It's always a joy to speak with some smiling faces instead of all gray rectangles. If you have a question, please use the Q&A feature located at the bottom of your screen to type in your question. At the end of each session, depending on time, we'll try to get to each of your questions. We'll also have time for additional Q&A at the end, and we've invited our presenters today to stay for that session and answer any questions you have if they're able to. But for now, it is my pleasure to introduce Angela Winfield, the Vice President and Chief Diversity Officer at the Law School Admission Council. Angela earned her BA at Barnard College of Columbia University and earned her JD from Cornell Law School. Most recently, before joining LSAC, she was the Associate Vice President for Inclusion and Workforce Diversity at Cornell University. Angela Winfield joined LSAC last year, and in her important role, she provides leadership, vision, energy, and a unified philosophy to LSAC's diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts on behalf of law schools and students seeking a career in law. Please join me in welcoming Angela Winfield.
Thank you so much, Anthony. It is my absolute pleasure to be here with you this morning and to be celebrating Diversity Law Day. So, as you heard, I'm Angela Winfield, and I am going to be sharing some opening remarks with you. So let me just preview a little bit of what I want to share with you. First, I want to give you a little background on me and share my story. And not because I'm egotistical and I just want to talk about myself, but I think it's really important to know and understand the stories of people that have come before you and have walked this path of going through legal education and becoming an attorney. We all have those stories. And anytime that we can hear someone else's, I think there's something that we can learn from that. So I'll share my story with you. Second, I want to talk a little bit about the importance of becoming a lawyer and the power that comes with that. Because if you really want to make a difference in the lives of individuals, neighborhoods, organizations, countries, the world, I truly believe that being an attorney and having that legal education, that legal background gives you an outsized chance of being able to make that positive difference. And third and finally, I want to talk about the importance of having a North Star for your life and your career. So let me start with my story. And my story really begins at about age 4. Obviously, it began before that because I was born. But at age 4, something happened in my life. I was diagnosed with 3 conditions: uveitis, juvenile rheumatoid arthritis, and glaucoma. And at that time, I could still see, but I knew that I was going to have challenges. And my parents knew that I was going to have challenges. At 4, I didn't know what those challenges were going to be exactly, but that set the trajectory for my life. I was a blind little girl who was Black. And I went through a number of surgeries and a number of experiences with doctors trying to save my vision. And when I saw those doctors and engaged with them, I think you might know and understand what it would have been like for me to see a doctor that reflected at least some of my backgrounds, to see a female treating me, or to have a person of color treating me. That happened rarely, but when it did, and there was one time in particular when it did, it gave me an amount of confidence and faith just to have a familiar face treating me. So let's move on. So I was diagnosed at 4. And then by the time I got into high school, that's when I really began to understand that my life was truly going to be different because I wanted to be an attorney. I didn't know exactly what that meant because there were no attorneys in my family and I'd never actually met an attorney, but it was something that I heard about and it was something that I said, yeah, I think I want to do that. And in my public high school in upstate New York, I had the opportunity to join the law academy. And that's when I really began to understand what the law was, what it could do. And when I met my first real live practicing attorney who took me under his wing and mentored me. He took me to my first deposition. He let me come to his firm and sit in on a partners meeting. And I began to see what attorneys could do and how they could advise and counsel their clients. So I pursued that career path through high school, and I focused a lot on my studies, right? That's where I went because when I was grappling with what my life was going to look like and the obstacles that I may have to encounter, that sent me into a place that wasn't necessarily all that happy. I was quite depressed, clinically depressed, and I had to work through that. Then, because of the focus that I put on, trying to find the support and getting the support that I needed from parents and guidance counselors and others, I went on to college. I went to Barnard College of Columbia University, and it was there that I really found my love of advocacy. I ended up graduating with my class on time, staying on track, even though I did have medical setbacks. And then going on to Cornell Law School, where I had the opportunity to really understand and engage with the law. I was deeply involved in moot court. I was also involved with clinical practice, where I got to represent individuals in criminal defense cases, in Social Security Administration cases, unemployment cases, and I also got to clerk for an acting Supreme Court judge here in New York State at the trial level. So that was all really fabulous and exciting for me. However, I do want to underline for you that I did this being a woman who is both blind and Black. Some people call that a trifecta of minoritizing identities. But the point of this, and the point of me sharing this, is that you can achieve this goal. It does not matter whether you've met an attorney before or not, you will. It doesn't matter whether or not there's an attorney in your family or not, You can do this. And it does not matter the obstacles that you might have to face being a minoritized or marginalized student entering into this career pathway. You can do this. I am not saying that there won't be obstacles. I'm not saying that there won't be naysayers. There absolutely will be. But what I am saying is that you can do this. If I can do it, you absolutely can do it. There is always a path forward, and there's always support that is there for you to help you through and navigate your path. And LSAC is one of those organizations that is rooting for you and that wants to support you. So that's my story. So let's move on to how attorneys can make an outsized impact on society. I want to give you a very brief history lesson of some cases where this has occurred in 1954, 1978, and 2015. So in 1954, there was a Supreme Court case, Brown versus Board of Education. Many of you may know this or you may not, but in that case, the Supreme Court held that segregation was not equal, and that separate was not equal, and that schools had to be integrated. This changed the trajectory of lives for many people in the US. In 1978, in Regis v. Bakke, this was a case where the Supreme Court said that race can be considered in admissions so long as it wasn't set by quotas, meaning that diversity was an important part of the higher education experience. This is actually being challenged again right now before the Supreme Court, and we're waiting to hear what's going to happen with that case. But it's this case, these cases and these decisions that can change the lives of many. And then in 2015, we have Obergefell v. Hodges, a case where the Supreme Court said that same-sex marriage equality is a constitutional right, and that same-sex marriage had to be recognized across states. These are three examples of legal cases that changed and granted rights that had already existed, but reinforced and made it the law of the land. And the people that moved these cases through, that argued them at the trial level, that argued them on appeal, that stood before the judges of the Supreme Court were attorneys. And the judges on the Supreme Court, with the stroke of their pen in writing these decisions, changed lives. And they were also attorneys. This is what I mean when I say that attorneys can have an outsized impact on people's lives. But let me say this, even though we need more lawyers, and lawyers can have an incredible impact on society, we don't need just any lawyers. We need more lawyers that reflect the diversity of this country and of the world. We need lawyers that bring a varied aspects of perspective and experience, because that's what informs both these cases and other aspects of the law. Now, the examples that I gave were landmark civil rights cases. We also need varied perspectives when it comes to creating laws. We need varied perspectives when it comes to drafting contracts, when it comes to providing criminal defense and criminal prosecution, when it comes to helping people purchase houses, when it comes to helping people craft their wills, and everything that the law touches. We need people who reflect our society. And anything else to me is unacceptable in a country that calls itself the greatest democracy in the world. And if we do not help to diversify the profession and support individuals like yourselves, we're going to perpetuate some really dire statistics. And I will share these with you. More than 18% of the US identifies as Latinx. Yet only 5% of attorneys are Latinx. 13% of attorneys in the US are Black or African American. Yet again, only 5% of attorneys are Black or African American. And while 6% of the population identify as Asian, only 2% of attorneys identify as Asian. And then similarly, if we look at sexual orientation, we have statistics that say that more than 5% of the US population is LGBTQ+, yet only 2.5% of attorneys identify in this way. And then shockingly, when it comes to disability, about 26% of US adults identify as having some sort of disability, yet only 1/3 of 1% of partners and associates in firms identify as having a disability. These are some stark statistics. And I share them with you not to scare you, not to create doubt or fear. Rather, I share these statistics with you because I think it's important to know the landscape and to know that if we truly want justice and access, we need to change these numbers, and you can be a part of that. You also need to know that there are organizations like LSAC, there are law schools like the ones involved in this Diversity Law Day program that are committed to helping change these numbers and create pathways for individuals to be a part of the justice system and to improve and advance the justice system. That's you all. And third, regardless of your life's journey, whether you end up in the law or not, it is important to know your North Star, to have a guiding focus for where you're heading. And this is so important because not only does it help you make choices, it also helps you when you encounter those obstacles and naysayers that I mentioned earlier that you will encounter, but you can overcome. And having this North Star in mind can be a powerful way to continue to move forward. Let me suggest that your North Star is simply to find your authentic voice and expression and put that into the work that you are called to do. Let me say that again. It is to find your authentic voice and expression and put that into the work that you are called to do. And what I mean by this is that if you want to pursue a career in law, and I'm using law as the example, even if you do not go that pathway, but I'm using that as an example because that's what we're here for today. That yes, you will have to learn about the structures and the frameworks and the rules and the cases and everything else that goes along with it. But don't let that change you. Because as I said earlier, we don't need just any attorneys. We need you in this profession. How can you bring your perspectives, your lived experience into the courtroom, into boardrooms, into community meetings, into wherever your practice and education may take you? Do not lose that because that is what is so desperately needed. And sometimes it is scary to have that as your North Star. Sometimes you may feel or question whether or not you belong. I assure you, you belong. You absolutely belong because that's what we need. And it is important to have this North Star and to help it guide you to the proper programs, schools, and individuals that are there to support you. In my journey, having this North Star and connecting with other organizations such as Cornell Law School, where I went to school, the law firm that gave me my first job and opportunity to be an attorney, and even LSAC, because their North Stars included diversity, equity, inclusion, and overlapped with my North Star, it was a clear choice for me. And it gave me meaning to my profession, the work that I do. I want that for you as well. So work on this, identify what your North Star is, and allow that to be your guiding light. So in closing, let me reiterate these three things for you. First, You can do this. You can walk this path regardless of your identities, regardless of the obstacles that you will face. There is support there for you. And if I can do this, you can do this as well. Second, you can have an outsized impact and change lives by being an attorney. And third, know and remember your North Star and stay true to that. I hope you all find today's program informative, inspiring, and encouraging. It's always my pleasure to be here and to have these conversations and send you and kind of kick off these events because it's an exciting time. And I am so glad that each and every one of you showed up today and is considering this path. So with that, I thank you and I'm going to turn it back over. And I think if we have time for questions, I may be able to take a question or two. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Angela, for those comments and sharing your story and that inspirational message and the need for diversity in legal education and the legal profession. Again, please feel free if you have any questions to type those into the Q&A, but I wanted to kick things off by asking a question of my own. So before we were talking, Angela, about in the role that you started last year with LSAC, you've been doing this listening tour and you've given over 100 sessions, listening sessions with different partner schools, law schools across the country. And I'm wondering if there's any information that you can share at this stage with students about the different initiatives that LSAC is considering about diversity, equity, and inclusion in the future.
Yes, that's a great question. And yes, I've been over the last 6 months, I've engaged with more than 100 different organizations. And this includes pre-law students, recent grads, law firms, the whole spectrum of the industry. And the reason why I'm listening and hearing is because LSAC needs and wants to be a part of the solution. We want to identify the key areas that we can help advance diversity. And this means not only providing support to students like yourselves, which we are looking to do and making sure that our programs fully do that. And we have some that already exist, like Khan Academy that helps you with LSAT prep, totally free. Programs like Plus, which is a pre-law undergraduate scholars program that offers support for exploring law as a profession. We have all these programs, but we need to do more. So that's why I'm doing this listening tour, to help us focus in on what are the key barriers and how can we begin to break them down even further by giving support to individuals, but also holding up the mirror and looking institutionally. Are there things in the system, in the structure of this that need to change? And what pieces of it can LSAC own? So we are looking at all of those things. I can tell you it's still very early. We're not announcing anything just yet, but we're going to have 2 or 3 priorities. And some of the things that have been coming up are around the pipeline, how to engage students earlier and do that outreach so students know and see themselves in the law earlier. We're looking at things like admissions test, the LSAT itself, that has come up a number of times. How can we provide better and more support around that? And many other topics and issues that we're going to have to narrow down and make some difficult decisions, but it's all about making the best and most positive impact for as many students as we can. That's our focus.
Excellent. Thank you so much for that answer. Again, I just want to say thank you so much, Angela, for being here today. Those remarks were right on point, and we need to hear those that right now in this time. So I want to thank you again on behalf of the committee that planned this event today, and on behalf of all of our attendees. Thank you so much for joining us. Angela Winfield, Vice President and Chief Diversity Officer for LSAC. Thank you very much.
Thank you. It's been my pleasure.
And at this time, I want to turn things over to my colleague, Chloe Matthews, for our next session, which will be our current student panel. Chloe?
Hi, everyone. Welcome. It's nice to meet you. My name is Chloe Matthews. I am the Associate Director of Admissions here at Boston University School of Law. I'm also a 2012 BU Law alum, so I've been hanging around for a while. I've also been doing this event for, I think this is now my 6th year. So I am excited to be here, even if we are virtual. I'm really excited to kick off our student panel. We have 4 students from our respective schools who have generously volunteered their time on a Saturday to share a little bit about themselves and their law school experience. The way I'll have this run is I will call on each panelist and have them introduce themselves, share a little bit about why they decided to apply to law school, and let us know what activities that they are involved in at their respective schools. I have a few additional questions that I'll ask, but I definitely encourage, as Anthony said, everyone to put questions into the Q&A section so that I can share them with our panelists. But I will kick things off. I will go in alphabetical order. So Mega, if you would like to start us off, introduce yourself and share a little about your law school journey.
Hi, everyone. My name is Mega Mathur. I am a 3L at Boston University School of Law. I think Chloe also said to explain sort of why I applied to law school. My background is almost entirely in public health. And so I had always thought I wanted to work in public health policy. And closer to the time that I was graduating undergrad, I realized, if I wanted to work in policy, it was going to be kind of hard to do that if I didn't know the laws that outline policy. So I thought about it, ended up working for 2 years before deciding that law school was the right next step for me. So I started law school in 2019, and here I am, pretty close to graduation, shockingly. And at law school, I've done quite a few things. Most importantly, had a lot of time with the Student Affairs Student Advisory Board, better known as SASA-B. So we work with student affairs to bring concerns from our peers up to them to see what they can do. I was on a journal, the American Journal of Law and Medicine, and participated with the Health Law Association. I'm sure there's a couple other things that I'm forgetting, but had an overall great time at BU Law as my time here comes to a close.
Wonderful. Thank you, Mega. Agnes?
Hi, my name is Agnes Kolbeck. I am a 3L at New England Law Boston. I wanted to go to law school because I always wanted to be a lawyer. I put it off for a long time. I realized in college that I had never met a Black lawyer before, and so I just thought that it was something that I could not do. But when my parents, when I was young, my parents were getting divorced, and the whole back and forth and going to court and the custody process, I knew that I wanted to be a lawyer and I wanted to help kids. And so I ended up working with kids in the capacity of a social worker for a while, and worked with a lot of lawyers, worked with a lot of judges, and realized through experience, I can do this. And so similarly, 2019, started law school, about to finish up. Along the way, I've been involved in my school's Black Law Student Association as a member and in leadership. I've also been involved in my school's first generation law student program, where I'm also in leadership in there. Tax Law Society. I've done judicial internships, a lot of volunteer work. So I'm on the Massachusetts Pro Bono Honor Roll for volunteer work as well. Probably some other things, but that's the gist of it so far.
Wonderful. Thank you. Angelica?
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Angelica Matakos Jennings. I'm also a 3L, and like my colleagues here, started in 2019. So law school's been a whirlwind in terms of the world around us and stuff. But I came into law school as a second career. I always wanted to go to law school, similar to my colleagues here, but put it off. I always called it a deferred dream, and it just. I worked in higher education for a few years. I actually worked at UConn, the main campus, and I worked at UNC Chapel Hill in student affairs and higher education, mostly in residential life and conduct. And as I navigated life and navigating my professional experiences, I realized I'm still thinking about the law. I'm still thinking about liability. But I'm also seeing a lot of decision makers and key players that don't look like me, or like people that I know, representative of the students that they're serving. And so for me, law school just seemed like a deferred dream that I needed to finally pursue. And so when I moved to Connecticut and realized that there were several, at the time, part-time evening programs, I started my journey as a part-time evening student. At the time, I was a single mom, and I identify as Latina. And so for me, it was making this dream a reality against all the odds that I felt were kind of obstacles at the time. And then I transitioned to becoming a full-time day student once I got married to my now husband. And in law school as a full-time day student, I've had the privilege and opportunity to serve on the Latinx Law Students Association e-board, involved with the Black Law Students Association as well. Also on Moot Court, the Connecticut Journal of International Law, mock trial, a whole bunch of things that I just did not think I was going to be able to do when I started. It was just merely get my JD. And I've been able to really explore so many different areas of the law, and opportunities to further facilitate what I've been learning in the classroom far more than I thought I would. And I'm loving it. And now, again, as my colleagues have mentioned, getting ready for graduation, which seems surreal, but very exciting as well.
Wonderful. Thank you. Tia?
Hi, my name is Taya Wilma, and I'm a 2L at Western New England School of Law. I guess I'll start with like the things that I'm involved in. So I am the Black Law Student Association, or BALSA chapter president. I am actually, and I believe Agnes is with me too. We are at the Northeastern Black Law Student Association convention, regional convention in Connecticut at Foxwood Resorts right now. So it's a great convention. So I'm chapter president for that. I am parliamentarian of Student Bar Association, SBA. And what else? I am on our school's, I believe it's called like Diversity and Outreach Committee. I'm the student member on that. I am a academic success TA. So it's basically like I explain it as like a freshman seminar for 1Ls, but I'm a TA for that. And I was a TA last semester as well. Last semester, I was also a TA for crim law. And now I am in the clinic, or our clinic, for legal aid. I'm in the education unit. And so those are the things that I'm involved in. I'm probably, like someone else said, probably missing a whole bunch of things, but for right now, these are the things I can remember. And how I became to go to law school. So unlike probably a lot of the people you'll meet in law school, I did not grow up saying like, oh, I can't wait to be an attorney. Like, this is not a place that I envisioned myself being. Even in college, it was not a place that I envisioned myself being. I grew up wanting to actually be a teacher, a second grade teacher. And it wasn't until 11th grade, and I was in US history, that I was like, that was the only class that I really felt passionate about. But also, I think that had a lot to do with my teacher at the time, but also the way that the laws really impacted people. As we look throughout our history, you can kind of chunk our history into like the big laws and the big policies that were made, and how those particularly affected the citizens, the people without power, and how laws really did that. And so I was like, okay, I want to do something like that. And so when I applied to my schools, or when I applied for my colleges, I applied all political science, because I felt like, okay, that seems like a good fit. And somehow the school I ended up going to moved my political science application to a law and society with a legal concentration, or like a legal pathway. And then my advisor saw that I did much better in my law classes than I did in my general ed classes. And so she's like, maybe you should, like, what about law school? I'm like, okay, well, I guess. So I applied to a 3+3 program through there. And my LSAT journey started when I was 17, 18. And that continued until I ended up not staying in that program and applying to other schools. And through a whole bunch of things later, I ended up at Western New England. And so, yes, I would say that It's been fun. It's been a fun journey. And yeah, so I don't know exactly what I want to do next, but yeah, that is it.
Wonderful. Thank you. This is a very engaged and involved group. I'm surprised any of you have time to go to class or sleep or eat. You're all involved in so many things. I have a few questions, but please, if anyone has questions, please feel free to put them in the chat. I want to make sure that we get answered anything that others have and not just my questions. But I will throw a few questions out to the group. I generally ask all current students when we have panels these two questions. I think they're really useful. And certainly when I was a law student coming straight through from undergrad, so these are some of the things that I was thinking about. So if anyone wants to share what the thing that surprised them most about law school was, whether that be, something you expected that was different once you got here, maybe a scary rumor that you heard that turned out not to be true, really anything if you'd like to share, something that surprised you about law school.
I can start, and I'd be curious to hear if my colleagues' experiences have been different, but I was shocked that law school really runs like a well-oiled machine. Like there are certain things that you are expected to do at certain times and certain moves that you are expected to make. So just things that I didn't know coming into it, like I didn't know that a write-on competition happens at the end of 1L, and I guess you're expected to participate in it. I didn't know that OCI happens at the end of 1L year. You're expected to participate in it. And just as background, in case anybody is unfamiliar, write-on competition happens typically at the end of 1L year, which gives you an opportunity to sort of submit an application and other work to get onto a journal. And then OCI would be on campus interviewing, which enables you to connect with interviewers and firms that might lead to a job. But in any case, a lot of these things happen at a very well-defined time in a very well-defined way. And if you sort of try to change it, people think you're crazy. And really the feeling I got was, it felt like a lot of my peers knew exactly what move to make at what time. And I didn't even know that there was a game being played. So for me, it was just sort of stunning that it like I said, it runs like a well-oiled machine, and you kind of have to figure out what you don't know in order to figure out how to move forward.
Great.
I can.
What, please? Yes.
I can go next. So the thing that surprised me the most, I would say, about law school just in general was I guess this could be my school or just my situation, but I did not think that my network, as far as who I was really cool with or who I was friends with, would be so so different than what I'm used to. I study with, and from 1L year, I study with a group of moms, which was I would never think I study with a group of moms, different race, definitely different age, different socioeconomic background. And along with that, I study with people who are on law review, and I'm not on law review, who have really great grades, great opportunities, and kind of have been taking the more traditional route of doing summer associate positions at these big name law firms. And these are people who I study with. And it hit me probably a few weeks ago that wow, I in my little old me, I study with all of these people who I feel are doing the right thing. Or on the other side, I study with people who have kids that are closer to my age. And I didn't think that would be the case, but I think a lot of times we come in with the perception of it's going to be super scary. Everyone's going to be super competitive. Everyone's going to be cutthroat. And I don't think that's the case for everyone. I'm not going to say that there's no one's competitive, that no one wants to be the top, but I was just surprised that people are not as they don't care so much about the grade number as they do about you and what you can contribute to a space, and how much you actually try to be better. And I think a lot of times grades can make people think that they're not enough, or they're not as good as they are, because they didn't get the grade that they wanted, or they're not in the top 10, they're not in the top quartile. But when you really boil down to it, we're taking the same classes. We're as long as we're engaged and we're trying, it's really, you can really have those connections. And so yeah, that's me.
Wonderful. Anyone else want to share? Agnes? Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I can. I definitely want to echo the first point of, yeah, there's a race, there's a game going on that you had no idea was happening before you got there. And I definitely thought that the hardest part was going to be the academics. People tell you about how hard law school is and how much reading there is and the high expectations, and you have to be the top of your class, but you don't really know what that means or how to get there, and the little pieces along the way. And I think that was the hardest part of the transition, as well as some of the social dynamics when people come in who do know the tricks. And as I mentioned, I'm a first generation law student, but there's a lot of students at my school that are not first generation law students. And so they've heard of this before. They knew what write-on was. I had never even heard of law review until the write-on competition was happening, like until it was way too late. And so things like that, it's kind of hard to keep track of. And again, the social dynamics. People had told me when I started that law school kind of feels like high school, and I didn't really know what that meant. And then I started, and there is sort of this grouping and clicking of you find your people and you kind of stay with your people. And that's not necessarily a negative thing. It's nice that I've had this core like pod that we've all bonded with. We're very close to. I feel like we're family. We're going to be friends forever. And we supported each other through all of this. But it also means that I think that there are other relationships that get missed. And I think you have to make an effort in law school to sort of reach outside of the group that you kind of end up naturally forming when you start.
Yeah, so I would say, I am also a first gen student as well. And maybe it's because I'm a little older, so I'm not afraid to ask for things the same way I was when I was straight out of undergrad. But I find that the professors and admin at the university, I'm at UConn Law, are so supportive. And I'm not like, I don't think I wasn't not expecting that, but I also wasn't expecting when I asked for, let's say, an extension on something to be met with complete understanding. Because, it's a little intimidating to ask, a law professor or whomever, like, I need an extension. I'm having a hard time. Can you explain this to me? Or in my case, I had a baby last spring. So I'm going to be out for a week. So being able to ask for support or say, I have a parent teacher meeting for my son's first grade class, and have things moved, for, let's say, an oral argument for a class that I'm in, because of my self-advocacy, of course, but to know that I felt comfortable enough to ask and know that it wouldn't be met with another slew of questions or resistance or anything like that. I think in general, it's surprising what can be seen as intimidating to approach certain people in higher positions who've graduated from all institutions, who are renowned speakers, for the support and advocacy that they'll have for you. And sharing part of my life, because I had to share part of my life with my professors, and not because I felt the need to, but because I felt comfortable enough to, I think has been one of the most surprising things that a lot of people don't expect when they're going to law school. It's this race that people have mentioned. It's this, I need to get a certain grade, I need to hit a certain curve, which was surprising in and of itself. But to know, like, but wait, these folks are here for me, and they're willing to help me understand. They're willing to help me, get to the end of the finish line. That part is something that I didn't necessarily come into law school, and definitely would not have imagined if I went straight out of undergrad at a younger age, was something that I would have expected by the time I graduated.
Wonderful, thank you. So I'm seeing a few questions in the chat, and I think this is a great one and was one that I was also going to pose to our panelists. So what is one piece of advice that you wish you could have given yourself either leading up to or during your first year?
I will say to give yourself grace. It's competitive in different ways. There's different opportunities to get involved. You will feel pressure all around. And a lot of that pressure is self-imposed. I know I can speak from my own experience. I put a lot of pressure on myself every semester during finals, and my partner reminds me, like, you did well last semester, you'll do fine this semester, stop stressing. And I think just giving yourself grace, knowing that you don't need to, be on the grind all the time to do well. And you deserve self-care. You deserve to reward yourself, and to relax, because that's the only way. You can't pour from an empty cup. So I would say to give yourself grace.
I would definitely echo that. And I think spend time with yourself. The summer before 1L, incoming 1Ls always want to say, what do I need to do? What should I read? What supplements should I get? What videos should I watch? Don't, because you'll learn it all when you get there, and you don't want to confuse yourself off the bat. Spend time with yourself and understand yourself. Know what you need when you get stressed. Know what it means. What does it look like when you're stressed? How do I take a break? What are the best ways of self-care for me? When I need self-care, what's a 2-minute version of that? What's a 30-minute version? And what's an hour version? Because when you're in school, if you feel like a break is going to take you that hour that you need to read, you will choose your reading every single time at the expense of your care. So have a version ready of like, look, I have 2 minutes, I can take a walk around the block, because you need that, or you are going to burn out quick. And I would also reemphasize the piece of the relationships. My professors have been my most invaluable resource during this process. They've seen 100 law students come in and out. So they're going to take time to get to know you, but they have seen versions of you around, and they can pull out the best possible version of you for law school. So find people that you connect with, that you trust, that have perspective, because when you're a student, everything feels like it's on fire all the time, and you cannot keep track. So you're going to need people who know better, who can see further than you, that can provide advice. And for me, that's been professors, and that's been alumni. So go to alumni events and take time to get to know your professors.
For me, I would say that one thing is I wouldn't have been so eager to go straight through. I graduated undergrad a semester early, but then, and I thought, I was like, oh, I'm going to be able to relax and really get to rest. But then the pandemic happened, and it was like rest, but kind of not rest. And I worked for some time during the pandemic. So it was, all of that was going on at the same time, and I didn't really get time to pause. But I think even with that pause, I probably should have taken a more extended pause, because I think sometimes there's value in being a non-traditional student. A lot of times they know what they want. And like, I'm at this point where I was just there's right now a career fair, a job fair going on downstairs, and people asking like, oh, what do you want to do? And I'm like, I kind of don't know. And that's because of a lack of exposure, which I think being a non-traditional student can give you that exposure. So I would not have been so adverse to taking a break, to waiting a little while before joining. But then another thing I wish I would have known is that a lot of times you are going to have, like, there will be an overwhelming amount of stress, like I believe Angelica was talking about, and that stress sometimes will bring out not the best part of you, that will not bring out the most hardworking, the most tenacious, resilient part of you. And at those times is when you need to push more, because no one will push for you. And I think my 1L spring, I had probably like the worst finals experience, because I was like, I'm so behind. I had gotten COVID like right before. So I was like, I'm so behind, I missed so much. There's no way I'm gonna catch up. And I kind of I had that defeatist mentality, and that mentally, that was probably like a really low period of time in law school. And instead of fighting to learn what I didn't know, I kind of like already gave up on myself. And then my grades looked like I gave up on myself. Whereas last semester I was taking a class, income tax, and the whole semester I was like, I don't know what's going on. People were dropping out of the class because they were like, I don't know what's going on. And I was like, no, I'm gonna fight to learn what's going on. So I stayed in I stayed in school probably like 10 hours each day before our final, and I learned income tax well enough to get a B. And to me, that's probably my most, like, that's not my highest grade, but that's my most impressive grade to me, because I'm like, I fought for every percentage of that B. And I think that's, I would have had the mentality to like, you have to fight more. You have to, because that once you lose a little, everyone will pass right through that race. Like everyone will just pass you. And you have to just believe that you can do it.
I will just add one comment, I think, to tie the previous three together, which is it will all be okay. Like you might be really panicked and really stressed out, you know, the day you get back your grades, or something happens and it just really throws you off your game. You will look back on it in 6 months and it will just be a blip on your radar. It will truly not matter. There are ways around every setback in law school. And I think it goes back to what a couple other people said about building relationships. Like find people who can talk you through it, who can help you find solutions, and you will be fine.
All great advice. Coming from the questions in the chat, this one was directed at Angelica, but it would be great if everyone wanted to share their answer. Sort of what are you passionate about doing with your law degree? Whether that would be, you know, what your direct plans are once you graduate, what you've been involved in while you're in school, maybe what your future plans are, anything that you'd like to share. But Angelica, if you'd like to start, since the question was directed at you.
Absolutely. So I'm interested in a lot. I will say like my top few are criminal law. It's not why I came to law school though. I came for education law. I'm very passionate in Title IX, higher education. I hope to one day in the far future, or maybe not so far future, to work in, you know, diversity and inclusion work at an institution, or to work in Title IX and compliance, or, you know, like institutional equity work at an institution sometime in the future. But I am interested in criminal law. That's something that has grown. Sorry, did I get muted again? And joining things on campus. So criminal law, I'm interested in employment law. I'm very interested in health law. Are other areas that I'm interested in that I've been able to really get closer into, and family law is near and dear to my heart. And so as far as what I'm doing next, I actually will be working at the state prosecutor's office for a 2-year fellowship. So I will be a special deputy state attorney, special deputy assistant state attorney, because we can't go straight out of law school. So that's the way around. It's kind of like a pipeline opportunity. So it's a 1 to 2 year fellowship that I'll be doing to get more experience, expanding on my passion for criminal law, my interest in criminal law. And then hopefully after that, pursuing the university realm or family law. And I've enjoyed doing that here at the law school. I wanted to kind of stay away from criminal law because I know it can be very emotional, especially for communities of color. And so for me, it was just kind of hard to avoid. The classes are great. The discussions are so vivid. And a lot of the classes that I took that are not necessarily related to the bar continue to align with either criminal law or family law. And then education, like I'm taking special education law now, and Constitution of the Child, and lying in the law. So all very cool seminars. And that's probably my favorite part about my law school is the seminar offerings that we have. The professors are so passionate about their areas of expertise, and I love to kind of see them engage in that way, and not necessarily planning for my final. And so that part has been helpful in getting ready for life after law school again.
Wonderful, thank you. We are getting close to time, but if anyone else would like to chime in with thoughts about their passionate feelings on their law degree, and if anyone wants to share, please jump in.
So I came to law school to do health law and eventually write policy around that. Except in law school, I found out that I have basically fallen in love with more traditional lawyering and not really policy writing. So after graduation, I'll be joining the healthcare department of a large law firm back home in Chicago.
Wonderful, thank you. Anyone else want to share?
Sure. I came to law school. My background is in juvenile delinquency, so I planned on focusing on criminal law and family law, and I learned that I love tax, which is weird, but I absolutely adore tax law. So I was looking initially at various firm opportunities or accounting firm type things. I have a clerkship for after law school, so I will be doing that for a year. But then I was at convention for BOLSA to compete with the moot court team, and I found that I love appellate advocacy. That is where I feel really at home. So thinking about maybe doing white collar work, white collar appeals specifically, so I can combine both appellate level advocacy with my interest in finance and tax. So we'll see what happens.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Oh, I think I said it earlier, but I don't really have any plans just yet. But I have some time, so hopefully I'll find it soon.
Absolutely. Well, we are at time, so I just want to give a huge thank you to all of our panelists who again have joined us on a Saturday. So thank you so much for being so generous with your time, and thanks for joining in on this session. And I will just say, I see that there are other questions in the chat that we did not get to, which I will try and put in some answers and links if I can provide things there. But it's great that you are asking questions. That is probably the one thing that I didn't know before I started law school, is that you can ask people questions, whether that be us admissions people, current students. There are plenty of people at every law school, not just the ones on this Zoom, that are ready, willing, and happy. And in fact, it is our job to answer questions from prospective students. So there's no such thing as a silly question. There's no such thing as, being afraid to ask something. We won't think anything is silly. We are literally here to help always. So definitely don't hesitate to reach out. Wonderful. I'm going to pass things off. Thank you again to our panelists. I'll pass things off to Lauren.
Thank you, Chloe. And once again to our student panelists, fantastic job. Your perspectives are so valuable. I was sitting there nodding along with all of your answers, because as a fellow first gen myself, I was like, oh yeah, I remember those things too. So thank you again to Angelica, Taya, Mega, Agnes. You guys are fantastic. All right, and so I'm gonna keep us moving along with our Diversity Law Day presentation. Again, my name is Lauren Majorowski. My last name, not pronounced anything like it, is typed out on the screen, so you all in follow-up communications can please feel free to call me Lauren. And I serve as the Director of JD Admissions at the University of Connecticut School of Law. And so for the next segment of today's program, we are going to address what I think is probably the elephant in the room. And that is the topic of financing your legal education. For many law students, myself included, this is the topic that was always lurking in the back of my mind, but simultaneously the one that I wanted to avoid talking about the most. And while admittedly this topic may not be as exciting as hearing from our alumni or our students, it is a critical component to your path to law school and success upon graduating. And so it's something that we definitely need to address. Law school is going to likely be one of the largest investments that you're going to make in your life. But the good news is that now, more so than ever, there are resources that can help you navigate this investment to make sure you are the most informed, and certainly at the very least more informed than I was when I embarked on this process. One such resource that is out there and available for pre-law and law students is a nonprofit institution that goes by the name of AccessLex. And they are committed to increasing financial literacy amongst pre-law and law students. And today I have the honor of turning the mic and the screen over to AccessLex's Northeast Regional Director, Ashley Norwood Strupa, who's going to guide us through a conversation, hopefully the first of many for you all, about financial literacy for law school students. So Ashley, take it away.
Thanks, Lauren, and thanks everyone for joining. I'm very happy to speak with you today. If I could possibly get screen sharing rights, that would be very appreciated. but I just want to give you a quick introduction of who I am. As Lauren mentioned, I work for Access Lex Institute, and we are a nonprofit organization that we focus specifically on law school students and their financial education. We want you to feel empowered about your finances before you leave school. And so we have developed our Max and Max pre-law programs with that in mind. It's specifically designed to help you into law school, through law school, and help you transition into your professional career through financial education. And so the first step for us is how you finance it, how you budget for it, and how you plan for it. I'm going to be going through this presentation, and it's really just a quick appetizer of what the Max Pre-Law program has to offer for you. And you never pay for anything through Max or Max Pre-Law, so don't be concerned about that. We are a completely free resource, and we partner with about 190 of the ABA accredited law schools in the country. At the end, I'll also show you how you can register for an account, so you can get more information about the Max Pre-Law program, and just do the presentations that we have so that you can learn more about it and kind of address that elephant in the room that Lauren mentioned, is how we pay for law school. And the first step is understanding the costs, knowing what your application process is, the types of aid there is, and then student loans. Average law school cost. Does anybody have a guess on what the average law school debt is in the nation? I want to throw in the chat panel. Anybody have a guess? How much do you think that the average student borrows when they graduate? It's about $166,000. 166,000. That means there are people that borrow more. That also means that there are people that borrow less. And when we're talking about the overall cost of law school, it doesn't start the day you walk in the doors. It starts now. You have LSAT or GRE costs that are right around $200. You have other related costs. If you take any of those exam prep courses, they can be up to $1,500. If you have to travel to take any of those exams, that's going to add into the whole overall cost. The application expenses for law schools are usually up to $90 each. The cost for credential assembly service is about $195, the CAS. And if you need additional CS reports, they're $45 each. So even before you have stepped inside the door, before you've deposited, you have already spent maybe $2,000. Or at least a few $100s on the cost of the exams and your CAS. Now you need to decide where you're going to go. And that's going to cost you money. At least that gets applied to your tuition in the fall, but your deposits are usually going to be $500 to $1,000. They are non-refundable. So when you choose that school, be confident that that's the school you want to go to, so you do not lose that money, that $500 or $1,000. The actual average law school expenses in the country, it's going to depend on what type of school that you go to. The average tuition and fees at a public institution where you are a resident of that state, right around $28,000. If you're a non-resident going to a public institution, right around $42,000. Private, right around $50,000. Doesn't matter if you're in state or out of state. Living expenses, going to vary just a little bit, or it's going to vary dramatically depending on where you are in the country. But for averages, for public institutions, the other living expenses, those other expenses, those personal expenses, right around $21,000 a year. And then for private institutions, right around $24,000. So you're looking at the average cost of law school between $48,500 all the way up to almost $74,000. Now there are schools that are more, there are schools that are less, but these are the averages, just so that you're aware. And I give you these numbers not to scare you away. I'm not telling you that law school is too expensive, I'm sharing it so that you are aware, so that you can start preparing now, because there are ways to cover the cost of these loans after you leave school, whether you go into big law and you start out making $200,000, or you start out in government work or working for a nonprofit and you're making $55,000, $60,000 a year. When it comes to the actual costs, those costs I just mentioned to you, those were the averages. That's not necessarily what you are paying. It's the cost, it's the sticker price of the schools. Direct costs, you don't have any say. The school is going to tell you how much you have to pay if you want to go there. Where you do have flexibility is your living and other expenses. I'm not saying that these are easy choices or easy decisions, but you can effectively lower how much you're borrowing by making different decisions on the right side of this column. Food and rent is usually where people spend the most money, especially rent. And I'm not going to tell you to stay in find the least expensive place to live. If you're going to school in an urban area, I want to make sure that you are feeling safe when you go home at night, because there are going to be times when you leave school and it's really late, you might have to walk home. I want you to feel safe. But there is a balance and some choices that you can make. Can you live with a roommate? Can you get a smaller location? If you're on an urban campus, can you pick a location that's further down the bus line, further down the train line, that's less expensive? So there are choices that are involved. Books and supplies, depending on the course that you're taking. Can you rent the books? Can you use ebooks? Can you buy used books? There's all these creative ways that you can start thinking about how to effectively adjust those costs. Because I don't want you to budget I don't want you to consider budgeting, taking the cost of attendance that the school gives you, that's the maximum amount that you can borrow, and just building your budget up to that. I want you to build a budget and make sure that it is lower than that cost of attendance. Now, when you're thinking about how you're going to actually pay for school, there's usually 4 different places. Personal resources, if you have any savings, if the family has anything to help pay it down, you can pay that directly to school. That's obviously interest-free, and you don't have to worry about borrowing anything. Next is grants and scholarships. That's what everybody wants. That's the free money. So start thinking about applying to grants and scholarships, whether it's at the university that you're applying to or outside scholarships. Next, are you going to be working during school? Are you going to be working part-time, going to school part-time? Can you use some of your earnings to at least pay for your living expenses so that you don't have to borrow for all of those living expenses? And then student loans, it's the devil that we live with, is student loans. You're going to have to live with those. You are not alone. Most law school students do take out student loans. And like I said, it's about the average for a class of graduates 2019, 2020 was around $166,000. Now, types of financial aid, there's going to be free options. There's going to be not free options. Scholarships and grants are obviously that free money. It could be need-based aid. So it takes into account your financial need on the Fafsa application. It could also take the way of a merit-based scholarship. So it's based on your academics. There may be opportunities for federal work study. If you may have done that in your undergraduate years, you are given an allotment of money if you work. So it's an award that you actually have to work towards, and you don't automatically get it all up front in one lump sum. It's up to you to find a job on campus and work the hours to get that money. That is best used to cover your living expense, some of your living expenses. And then finally, the student loans. You can borrow federal student loans or private student loans. We always recommend that you consider the federal student loans before private. Federal student loans have protections and benefits that private lenders do not offer, such as public service loan forgiveness, income-driven repayment, postponement, and the biggest one, in the last 2 years, interest rates for federal student loans have been 0% due to the pandemic and the CARES Act that passed back in March of 2020. If you were in repayment during that time, you also you haven't needed to make any payments on your student loans. And private lenders did not offer that same sort of benefit. So it's something to really think about when you are considering your borrowing when you leave school. I mentioned grants and scholarships, so I want to promote our resource, the Access Lex Law School Scholarship Databank. I have the link there on the screen. Use it, learn it, love it. It is basically a work of love that we did during the first year of COVID on my team. We searched all of the law schools in the country. We searched law firms. We searched all nonprofit organizations looking for scholarships that were awarded to law school students in the last couple of years. You can filter it to be as focused in on your needs as much as possible. It could be your ethnicity, it could be what type of law you want to practice, where you want to practice, where you come from, what school you graduated from. And you can find lots of free money in there. We have over 800 scholarships listed, and it changes every day. We do keep updating it absolutely daily to make sure it's as accurate as possible and include as many resources for you as possible as well. So get the free money so that you can lower how much you have to borrow. And when you are hopefully getting acceptances to multiple law schools, you're going to want to make sure that you're doing a comparison of your offers that is comparing apples to apples. So you want to take a look at each school, list out all of the free money that you're receiving, subtract that out so you know what your out-of-pocket cost is, and then start thinking about how you're going to cover the remaining amount through loans, through other resources, what have you, but you want to make sure that you're comparing them apples to apples. So putting them into a chart like this will make it a lot easier for you when you are making those financial decisions. And like I said, we have to live with student loans. Let's just understand them a little bit better. For federal student loans, you need to complete the Fafsa. That's the free application for federal student aid. You do that on the federal student aid site, studentaid.gov. If you didn't previously complete your FAFSAs yourself, or mom and dad completed your FAFSAs while you're in school, this is the time to start doing it yourself. You can receive the direct unsubsidized loan just by completing the FAFSA. The Grad Plus loan will require that you complete the FAFSA and do a separate application, but it's just doing a credit check. It's not pulling your actual credit score. It's not looking at any debt to income ratio. It's just checking to make sure you don't have certain adverse credit history on your credit report. And then private loans will be a private application through that lender. Your borrowing limits for the direct unsubsidized loan is $20,500 per year. The direct Grad Plus loan will be what you already have for aid, including the unsubsidized loan, subtracting that out from your cost of attendance. And then whatever's remaining is how much you can borrow. So the cap is the cost of attendance. Private loans will set their own limits, but it can't be more than the cost of attendance for the school. Interest rates, they are set annually and are fixed. So if you plan to start law school in the fall of 2022, we don't know what the rates are going to be just yet, but they are set every July 1. And then private loans is going to depend on the type of loan that you have, whether and what their credit requirements are. So the more credit-worthy you are, then it's going to have a lower interest rate. Well, that's how it's supposed to work. They might be fixed, they might be variable, so the rates will go up and down. And then repayment options are completely very transparent for the federal program. You have a lot of options. There's debt-driven options, there's income-driven options that will allow you to repay based on how much you make, not how much you borrowed. Private loans will give you whatever it is they offer. It's usually 2, maybe 3 options. And then forgiveness, specifically public service loan forgiveness, is only offered to federal student loans. They are not offered to private loans. Private loans would be subject to maybe forgiveness or repayment program that you have with your employer, maybe a reimbursement program, but they aren't subjected to the other forgiveness programs that federal student loans have built in. I am going to give you a link to our Paying for Law School booklet. And this booklet is the companion piece for this presentation, and it'll help you when you are, I'm going to put it here in the chat panel. It's going to help you just kind of, everyone's a different type of learner, and it might help you in the event that you need to, you want to read through some of the stuff, digest it, or read it through and then ask some questions later. So you can always access that. There we go. And then just quickly, Max Pre-Law is a program. It's completely free. We break it up into 4 different sections: applying to law school, choosing a law school, paying for law school, and then budgeting for law school. We have 4 specific presentations about that, and then other additional resources. And we also have coaching that we can also help you with. All of us on the team are accredited financial counselors. If you would like to register for Max Pre-Law, go to askedna.accesslex.org. That's where all of our Access Lex educational resources are housed. And you sign up by just giving us your name, your email, your intended law school year, and you will be good to go. And you'll be able to access our Max Pre-Law coaching, where you can sit down with one of us and have a 30-minute phone call as many times as you need, just to kind of chat about what it is that what those burning questions are. How are you going to make it work with these student loans? How can you adjust your budget? Different budgeting tactics. We go over strategies, and I like to say it's the best bang for your buck, because it's completely free, and you can do that as many times as you want. And when you transition into law school, you'll have access to Max coaching, which it will follow you through your law school program. And when you transition out, it'll also be available. So you always have an accredited financial counselor who specializes in working with law school students to help you through those questions that you have. And let's see, did we have any questions?
Yes, Ashley, we received one question that I'd love if you could tackle. Jace asks, what type of adverse credit histories are the federal loans looking for?
So adverse credit history for federal loans, they're looking to see if you've had a bankruptcy, a forbearance, not forbearance, foreclosure, a tax lien, and federal student loan default in the last couple of years. And they're also going to look for if you are past due on a different type of debt, over 90 days past due on a debt that's over, it's like it goes up with inflation, but it's around $2,600. So it's very select. And if for any reason you have any of those, you can still get approved. You can go back and appeal it, showing that you've fixed something, fixed that problem that's showing up on your credit report, or you can apply with an endorser, which is essentially like a cosigner.
Thank you so much. So for the audience, if there are any other questions you have for Ashley, we do have a few more minutes left during this session. But while you all are thinking up your last minute questions for Ashley, I really do want to impress upon you too that we, the law schools, are here to help you as well. I brought in the expert Ashley in order to talk about from a third party perspective, but we at each of our law schools have dedicated financial aid professionals, and this is exactly what they do. They are looking to talk to students to find ways to keep your debt burden low. That's a good thing for the law schools too. We want our students to have, lower than that 166,000 average student debt load when we graduate. So there are a plethora of counselors, both external to the law schools, a part of the law schools that you are applying to will be attending. So just know that more than anything, you actually have resources. Again, as a first generation graduate, my parents struggled with even trying to figure out how to file the Fafsa. And so, there wasn't a lot of help there, all the love and support in the world, but just not necessarily this level of financial literacy that I think everybody needs before you head to law school. So just know that there are professionals who deal with this day in and day out, and they can have really creative solutions, really great advice. My favorite piece of advice that I received was live like a law student when you're a law student, so you can live like a lawyer when you're a lawyer. But in the meantime, Ashley, it looks like we've got another question for you. So if the FAFSA only gives you a max of $20,500, how do you finance the rest of your tuition and cost of attendance? With the other loan options you've shown?
Exactly. So that's what the Grad Plus loan is there for, to take up the slack for the rest of those expenses, both your direct expenses with the law school itself, and then those living expenses.
Thank you. And this next question is from Casey. I'm actually going to take it, given that at UConn we are an in-state school, and so residency most definitely impacts tuition prices. Casey asked, if you move to another state for school, when can you claim residency for lower in-state tuition? That's going to vary school by school. Oftentimes, the legislatures of those states set those rules. The Connecticut state rules are codified in statute, and for UConn, it's 1 year. So if you were to move here, this month, welcome to Connecticut, and then apply next year for fall 2023 enrollment, by that time you would be considered an in-state resident and therefore be able to take advantage of that lower in-state rate.
I want to thank you, Lauren, for inviting me today. And I do want to just echo what you said. Obviously, go to the financial aid offices of the law schools. They are a resource for you to talk through these situations. Any kind of questions you have about student loan financing, we are just an additional resource to help you along your financial path. We want you to feel empowered about your money, and before you choose a law school, you can work with us, or after you enter law school, because we likely offer our max program for free for law school students at your law school. We only have, I think, 5 or 6 that we don't at this point, but there's most out there. We're an available resource for you.
Thank you so much, Ashley. Fantastic information. Again, stuff I wish I would have had before law school, but I'm happy that we're passing it along to the next generation so that they are more educated. And before I pass the torch over to my colleague Anne to introduce the next session of our presentation, I do for 1 second want to harp on the external scholarships, and particularly the Access Lex Databank that Ashley had mentioned. And the reason why I'm harping on it is because I've been doing this now for 8-9 years. And whenever I talked about external scholarships, it was always a little difficult where to point you to. Every law school had a little cache of scholarships that they posted online. There are websites like fastweb.com, FASTWEB, that you may end up already knowing because they service undergraduate external scholarships as well. But really, the link that Ashley just dropped into the chat, the Access Lex Databank, is the first comprehensive law school only external scholarship resource. And, yes, a lot of these external scholarship programs, they're going to require that you do extra work, write a short essay on why do you want to go to law school? Why do you want to be a lawyer? But a pro tip, frankly, you're probably going to have to answer that question as part of your law school application process, maybe in your personal statement. And so you can frankly rework parts of your personal statement to apply to many of these external scholarship programs. And before anybody balks at the fact that, some scholarship programs are $1,000 here or $4,000 here. Well, by the time that interest compounds on that $4,000 loan that you would otherwise be taking out, you're looking at paying back a much larger rate. And just one more thing about external scholarships. I have a colleague, he's actually a dean of admissions at another law school, and his wife went to veterinary school. And if any of you are familiar with vet school, those tuitions are pretty high. And so with external scholarships, she was actually able to, she applied far and wide, and she got half off. She found external scholarship opportunities that paid for half of her vet school tuition. So I'm telling you from real experience, you may feel, like you're sending out these applications for external scholarships into the ether and never hearing back, but they do exist. Millions of dollars are left on the table. So it is a worthwhile endeavor. And so now I will get off my financial aid high horse, my scholarships high horse, but I really do believe this is important. Again, Ashley, thank you so much for all of the resources you've provided. And with that, I am going to pass the mic over to my colleague, Anne, to move us on forward to the next component of our Law Day presentation.
Thanks, Lauren. I just want to take a moment. Wow, that information about financing law school was so incredible. And I wish I had that. I had, I'm going to say, zero financial literacy before I applied to law school. And as a single mom, part-time student who actually didn't graduate that long ago, that would have been like really, that's stunningly good information. Thanks, Ashley, too. So, and thank you, everyone. I'm so inspired, actually, by all of the stories I've heard today. This has been really incredible. It's my first Diversity Law Day. And that aside, I'd like to, I'm delighted, actually, to introduce today's alumni panel. Jimena Mojedas of Boston University Law School, Dan Brody of UConn Law School, Irene Chan of New England Law Boston, and Delmarina Lopez of Western New England Law School. Jimena, would you like to begin?
Sure. My name is Jimena Mojedas. I am currently in Denver, Colorado. I practice criminal defense. I recently moved to private practice, but I was at the public defender office before then. I went to Boston University, graduated in May of 2020. And I am Latina, for those of you curious.
Thanks, Jimena. And I think, and so Dan, would you like to introduce yourself?
I think he just hopped on a little bit late, Anne.
Oh,
so
okay. Hi, Dan. You know what? I'll move on. I'll come back to you, Dan. Irene, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi, yes. Good afternoon. My name is Irene Chan. I've been practicing for 5 years now, and thank you for inviting me, Anne, to this to share about my experiences in my career as an attorney after graduating from New England Law Boston. I graduated in 2017, and I had graduated and moved back to my hometown in Brooklyn, New York, where I applied after taking the bar, and I found employment with an employment law firm in Jersey City, mainly doing employment law and litigating class action lawsuits. I was there for like a year before I went on to another law firm. We also did employment law, and this firm, it's a bigger firm, it's a mid-sized firm, and we also did employment law, and we focused mainly on discrimination and wage and hour lawsuits. And after that, in my current position, now I'm an agency attorney. I work for the Department of Justice. I handle any and all types of civil litigation, and I've been here for 1.5 years now, and it's a learning experience for me currently. So, but yeah, so that's where I am right now.
Thanks, Irene. Let's see, just make sure I didn't mute myself. Yeah, thanks, Irene. Delmarina, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. Hi, welcome. Thank you for having me. My name is Delmarina Lopez. I am a 2020 graduate of Western New England Law. So I was a COVID grad. We survived. We're doing okay. So when I graduated when I was in law school, I did some immigration law and some criminal defense law through the practicums offered at Western New England. I think that was pretty life-changing. That kind of experiential learning led me to my first job right after passing the bar, which was working at a habeas corpus firm. It was a private firm who did cases that were contracted by the state. I did that for a few months and then quickly realized that the firm life wasn't for me at that very second. And so I took a break from the firm life and I'm now in the corporate sector, doing labor law and more like HR type stuff. People would be surprised with how much of like a legal background fits into that kind of work. So I'm at a quasi nonprofit doing that now. And then I was recently elected as the first person of color to be a city councilor in my city. So I'm now also doing public service.
Nice.
Amazing. Okay, awesome. Dan, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure, thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Dan Brody. Sorry for being a couple minutes late. I am a 2015 graduate of UConn Law, and I work at the sort of regional law firm Robinson and Cole. I started there after a one-year clerkship, and I'm in the litigation section. My sort of area of practice primarily involves government enforcement actions, internal investigations, and mostly the sort of white collar cases that go on with like a U.S. Attorney's Office, like where Irene is, or state and federal regulators.
Thanks, Dan. So I'll just, you know what, I'm going to just ask you some questions then. Let me see if there are any in the chat, actually. Let's see. Does anybody have a question? Not yet. All right. So I'm very curious about how you all decided to go to law school and what the process was like for you, whether it was easy, whether you had, someone explaining financial literacy to you and everything else that's required as you're making that first step to law school, or what happened? How did you make that work for you all? Would anyone like to answer that question?
I can answer. I am a first generation law student / attorney. My parents did go to university, but in Argentina. So the university process itself was pretty new to us, especially law school. I didn't really have anyone in my life to ask questions, or I didn't have any law mentors. My junior and senior year of undergrad, I went to undergrad in Boulder, Colorado. So I reached out to every lawyer law firm in Boulder, just asking if I could basically hang out at their law firm and offering my free labor. And I ended up working for a criminal defense attorney who was formerly a public defender. And she really became kind of like a guiding mentor for me personally, and answered a lot of my questions about when I was making that decision of where to go to law school. I was deciding between two schools. The finances were slightly different. The rankings were slightly different. And it was so important to have someone to kind of show me the way. I ended up picking BU because they had the clinical program that I wanted, which was the criminal defense clinic. I knew I wanted to be a public defender, a criminal defense attorney. So that was a huge factor for me, but also they offered me a scholarship and the other school didn't. And that was massive, because you can't really want to be a public defender and also go into a ton of debt unless you're willing to do it for 10 years. And I'll tell you right now, it's really hard. So I wouldn't really commit to 10 years right off the bat. And that's for public student loan forgiveness, for those who aren't familiar with that. What tips or recommendations do you have for incoming 1Ls to securing employment later on? I wouldn't worry about that yet. That question in the chat, securing employment, I wouldn't worry about that your 1L year. I would worry about doing your best and just learning and kind of being open to maybe internships that you otherwise don't know that you would be interested in, would be my biggest thing. The employment will come. Just do your best and focus on school.
That is excellent advice. I totally echo that. So
I can jump in if you'd like.
Yeah, go ahead. Thank you.
No problem. So yeah, just to echo the don't worry about that. Right now as a 1L, what you think you might want to do may not actually be what you want to do. And I know some people say that and you think it's a little cliche and you're like, no, I know exactly what I want, at least some of us. But we really don't. So like maybe you end up in whatever you envision yourself, but the reality is that there's a really high chance that you won't. I went into law school thinking, well, at first I actually thought I was going to be a sports and entertainment lawyer. And then I went in and I was like, no, you know what? I'm going back to my childhood dream and I'm going to be a criminal defense litigator. And after doing criminal defense for a while, like it was really fun, but genuinely it was not what I thought it was. And so what we might think is our career choice and like we might think it's something that will really fill us. At the end of the day, like that might not be your path. And who knows, maybe someday I'll go back to criminal litigation, but right now that's not the path. And so I found there are other avenues and there are other ways to just use the skill set that you get in law school and like use your degree and your licensure in other ways that you might not even think about. And so I wouldn't really close myself up to those opportunities as a 1L. I would really kind of push to the side everything you think you know about being a lawyer and just like take in every opportunity, say yes to everything, every conference, every panel, every opportunity, say yes to the clubs and organizations, say yes to the clinics. A lot of it, yes, it's going to be more work, but if you say yes to those things, you're going to discover what you really love. And for me, I discovered I really love public interest. But for you, it might be something different. But if I didn't put myself out there, I would never have figured out exactly what it is that I wanted. And just speaking a little bit about my path. So no one around me was an attorney either. I'm the first in my entire family to graduate with a doctoral level degree. In my immediate family, neither of my parents had a college degree. So a lot of it felt like navigating by myself. I think what helped me was mentorship, and it didn't necessarily need to come from other attorneys, but just from people in my life that like I respected and had attained some level of like whatever it was that I needed. So perhaps it wasn't someone who went to law school, but someone around me who had gotten a master's degree and understood like graduate applications, or someone who was really, really good at looking at resumes, like all those little components that you don't think about. Tapping into the resources around me. Although I didn't have an attorney around me, I did have all of these other people who were a really good part of my village. And so tapping into those sources was really important for me.
Thank you. Irene, would you tell me, I know that you were working in private practice until you moved over to the Department of Justice. How did that happen for you?
So yeah, just echoing what Ms. Lopez and Jimena was mentioning about, I actually originally went to law school wanting to practice criminal law. I even applied and interviewed with Seoul DA's office in New York City. I even interviewed with the Bronx DA before getting my rejection letter. So I focused on the bar without any type of offer. And after taking the bar, I had moved back to New York and basically started applying. I applied for probably about sent out maybe 100 applications before finally getting an offer at an employment law firm. So that kind of just dropped on my lap, and I was in employment law and I kind of got stuck. Not stuck because I really did enjoy working as an employment lawyer, and went to a more mid-level law firm in Manhattan. At my third year of practicing, and then realizing litigating was a lot and felt like I wasn't really happy with litigating. So I applied on usajobs.com, where they do have a lot of applications for attorneys to want to apply for the government. And that also kind of, I was very lucky at that time where the Department of Justice were looking for attorneys. In my agency, I worked for the Bureau of Prisons, and I applied, and it was a long process. The background check was 5 months, and I didn't actually work in the office until December of 2020. So I've been there for a year and 4 months. And basically I didn't get my training until I'm actually going to my training next week, which would be the first in like 2 years since COVID started. So that's also been a challenge to get attorneys trained on our current position as what you call an in-house counsel, attorney advisor type of position. But yeah, I really enjoy working for the Department of Justice. Something that I appreciate is the benefits and the work balance, which I felt like I didn't have in my last position as a litigator in my employment law firm. So, but yeah, I really enjoy my position right now. I think the one of the biggest plus is the benefits and the work balance. But yes, definitely.
That is, thank you, Irene. That's work-life balance. I think I have two favorite things to talk about, and one is work-life balance and the other is the importance of mentors. Dan, would you like to talk a little bit about either one of those topics, work-life balance? And I also noticed, I think that you also had been a government lawyer, so you probably can speak to the balance too.
Sure, I guess I'll talk about all those things.
And you can also talk about anything that you want. You don't have to be limited by what I just asked you.
All right, I'll try to stay on message. So I wasn't really a government lawyer. Like actually, I think we have a pretty common theme here, but I went to law school thinking that I would go into criminal law and I would be a prosecutor. And while I agree that you should, keep your options open and sort of figure out in law school the types of things that you want to do later on, I will caveat that by saying nothing you really do in law school outside of real clinical experience, like off campus, is going to actually give you a very good insight into what day-to-day life practicing in a specific area can be. So if you want to be like a corporate attorney and you take the corporate law class, unfortunately, that's really going to do very little about what your day-to-day practice is going to look like. And that's just one example. So keep your options open, be sort of broad in your thinking. And that's generally pretty good advice. There was a question about sort of like what you can do to get jobs. And some of the responses would be like, oh, just focus on grades. And I think that's a good message. During your 1L year, you're really confined in what you can do in terms of like classes you take and things like that. So the only real way to be competitive in the job market is to be competitive with your grades. So the focus should be there. On the other hand, putting aside the sort of discussion about keeping your options open, if you know what you want to do, and some of you probably do, you can be very discerning about how you go and try to get opportunities in that area from when you are a 1L. And so while you're not going to be able to take different classes, you're not going to be able to do different clinics, there are certain, I'll call them like networking opportunities that you can focus on. And so if you're interested in like public interest, or you're interested in going to a law firm, there are various different opportunities that are going to be out there that you should focus your time on, like you're not in class time. So that's something that you can talk to with the career development counselors at your schools, something you can ask like mentors that you know or that you meet along the way. And I guess sort of transitioning over to the mentor part of the discussion, I met some really important people when I was a law student that helped me get my job now. And so I was fortunate enough to go into my 3L year with a clerkship and a law firm offer for after my clerkship already set. And I credit a couple of mentors that I met during law school with that, because they pushed me to go for different opportunities, to apply for law firms, to get involved in various bar association activities. And in those activities, I met people at my current law firm that helped me get interviews and like prepare me for interviews. And then going to like a networking event after I had done a round of callbacks at my firm now. I met some of the people who had just interviewed me like the last week, and they invited me to sit at the law firm's table. And I think it was like a Wednesday, and like that Friday I got a call with an offer. And I was told like, so many students just sit in class and like go home and then like do their work and like watch your Netflix and things like that. And if you want to be in like the law firm environment, the sort of end game is that you want to be a partner there. And one of the components for that is to be like a networker and to ultimately be able to build strong enough connections that you can bring in work for the law firm, you can bring in business. And they said, we struggle to get our young associates to go to these types of networking events because it's like something that's not a billable hour that cuts into people's free time. And so they said, like, we've seen you at 2 of these already and you're in school. And so we just know that like you get it and you get the value, and we're not going to like have to like force you to do those things. So that was one of the ways I just made myself more marketable to a law firm, was going to really specific events where I knew there would be people there. So that's one way, even as a 1L, you getting to know people, and you'll find that when there's some 100 or so students that nobody at a law firm knows that apply, and then there's you, and you've made connections with a couple people there and they already know you in some way or another. It might not be in a substantive legal sort of background, but it just might be like as a person, you're less of an unknown quantity. So you have a really good chance, all things being equal, or even maybe not as good grades as somebody else, to get an offer there. So that's sort of like one thing you can do. Mentorship has been really important for me. And I would say that when you're in law school, you can look to professors, but really try to get practicing lawyers to sort of like be your mentor, try to get to know them a little bit more. Unfortunately, your law professors are only going to be able to take you so far once you graduate. And sometimes they haven't practiced in a really long time, so they might not have the most relevant insight about things. So just keep that in mind, I guess. Maybe it's a little controversial on a law school panel to say, but just realize that, you know, people in various fields are going to have good insight to give you. And then just be very broad, again, with seeking out mentors. You could have a mentor for like one specific thing, and then you can have another mentor for other things, and they can be within your organization or company or outside. And so I guess like getting involved in the various bar organizations has been a really good way for me to find mentors and just get to know people on various levels. And what were the other questions?
No, I think you did it. You did a great job. So I think I see that there are actually 2 questions in the chat on the following topic. I'm going to put this out for all of you. Have any of you ever experienced imposter syndrome? I think we probably would maybe all answer yes. I know I have. And how did you cope with it while you were in law school? And perhaps do you even have moments of imposter syndrome flare up in your current positions? Does anyone want to jump on that one?
I can start. I kind of answered in the chat a little bit, but I had imposter syndrome all the time in law school. It's normal for everyone to feel that way, especially because law school can be a pretty competitive place, and frankly, for no reason, if you ask me. But people do feel a sense of competition for the curve and things like that. Just remember, you worked really hard to get into the spaces that you're in. You earned everything that you got, and you don't have to change yourself to, fit in with, whatever is perceived to be the norm. I think that the law field is changing a lot. I think that the new generation of attorneys looks very different than the old generation of attorneys. And I think for the best, in my opinion. I think law schools are becoming more diverse every year. I think that means that the workplace is becoming more diverse every year. Does that mean that I'm still the only brown person at most places I work? Yes. I was at the public defender office. It was me and one other woman of color attorney, and people got us mixed up every day and we look nothing alike. So, those experiences are, difficult. They make you feel, even more, other than you already do. But it's so important to just have the self-confidence and reassurance that you worked hard to get into every single place that you got, and you don't have to feel less so that other people can feel comfortable. That's not something you ever have to do. You don't have to do it in law school, and you don't have to do it in practice. Because, I walk into courtrooms every day and I get asked if I'm the interpreter basically every day. And that's their problem, not mine. And then I get on the record and everybody looks at me all dumb. So it's just a matter of being confident in yourself and reminding yourself daily that you've done everything you need to do to get into these spaces, and people will fall in line accordingly. I take that very seriously. I've taken a very hard line when it comes to that. Not everybody, is necessarily going to agree with my way of going about things, but it's worked for me so far. So if you find yourself, feeling like you don't belong, or like you shouldn't be somewhere, just remind yourself that you should. In law school, my saving grace was my affinity groups. I was part of the Latin American Law Student Association. It's where I found all my best friends, where I found my roommate. I was for bridesmaid. Like, those organizations really carried me through my law school experience. And I would so recommend joining them when you start law school. It's cool to join, the business law association, things like that for professional reasons. But I think affinity groups is really where you'll find like your people that will make you feel comfortable and safe and like you belong. And you can find that in practice too. But since you're all, going into law school, I would super recommend reaching out to affinity groups before you get there, going to their events, talking to them, seeing if these are the kind of people that you want to create these relationships with, because they'll be personal. But just like Dan was saying, they become professional. All those relationships later can become job opportunities, networking opportunities. And it's really important to remember that in law school. And being yourself, you're going to find places where you feel the most comfortable just by being exactly who you are.
Thank you, Jimena. Would anyone else like to talk about imposter syndrome? I have another question. If that's not your favorite, I'll give you another one. So I'd like to know about your experience with mentoring. If you entered law school without a mentor, or you didn't know where to find one, what did you do? Did you just continue on mentorless, or were you able to find someone in law school?
So I can answer that. I think that joining a lot of organizations really helped. I think, as Sam was saying, just to keep it, open mind, and talking to professors really help as well. But I think that also having a close-knit group while in law school, having the same people with the same like mind about your focus, about your, your likes and hobbies, that also helped in a way. Finding a mentor while in law school wasn't difficult, but sharing, having a group of friends, I think was helped my mindset in getting through law school. And my mentors are really my professors. Like, they will always have like an open door policy where you can talk to them if you have any issues or concerns. And you can find it in all types of places. It's about how you want to go about your issues and problems. And I think that in terms of finding a mentor can knowledge also network. I think that's also a big thing that I've learned in law school. Network as much as possible. Go to these events that would help you meet other practicing attorneys and get to know their career path. And yeah, I think largely that it's upon you. You can choose whoever you want to be a mentor. In law school, there's just so many different options and venues in terms of finding one. So definitely go about that route.
Thanks, Irene. So Irene and I both went to law school in Boston, where there are many, and I think Dan mentioned it too, that there are many local bar associations that have networking events. And in law school, everybody's looking for free food. If I recollect correctly, everybody wants, well, prepared food also. And a great way to get a meal that you didn't have to make yourself was to see if the local bar associations had any dinners. And there are many actually more affinity type bar associations as well. I can think of the LGBTQ plus bar association in Boston, but some law schools are not in Boston and don't have quite as many. But is that an opportunity for people outside of big cities? Does anyone have an experience with local
So
bars?
I think I can answer that because we're not in Boston.
Thank you.
And so I think some folks believe that us not being in Boston kind of limits the opportunities, but I think it was actually kind of the opposite. At least it's my experience and my colleagues that I've talked to about this, that it's the opposite because we kind of have a monopoly around here. And so because we're the only one, we're not fighting for the attention with like 20 other law schools. All the firms are really connected to us. And the Bar Association here is connected to us. The courthouses are really connected to us. So there was always an opportunity for us to network and to, you know, find a mentor. And just because we're not in Boston, that didn't mean we couldn't tap into the Boston resources. So we kind of were able to double dip. I was involved in a mentorship program that was based out of Boston. So there were a lot of Boston-based students and Boston-based attorneys and people from the Attorney General's office and a bunch of attorneys that were like really interconnected. And because I was not from a Boston school, I think it was easier for me to be involved. I just didn't have to compete in the same way.
That's great.
Really helpful.
Yeah, and I sure didn't mean to say that everybody has to live in Boston to get access to bar associations. Just my own lack of experience. But I think overall, what I'm hearing is, and anyone can correct me if I'm wrong, that that being part of a legal community, whether it's in a big city with lots of bar associations and courts and everything, or being somewhere where you're the only law school in town and everybody's, you know, like asking for law students from your school, that once you enter legal community, my sense is that it's pretty welcoming. Do you all have that sense?
Yeah, I would agree with that. And I think that the question is a good one, like, you know, how do you get involved? And I'll just share a quick anecdote. I was going to this bar association dinner in New Haven, Connecticut, and I was working out of Hartford, and it was going to take about an hour to get there. And I invited a law student who declined, saying that she had been in New Haven the night before and didn't want to drive back. And so I'll use that to say that the question about, like, you know, if you're in a major city or something like that, you know, whether it's easy to find these things, the real question is whether you go and whether you see value in that. And so you can be like somewhere outside of like the main city, and it might be, well, there are not as many things offered here, or you can be in the main city and be like, well, there's so many people here. Like, everyone's going to have a different challenge. You can't answer that by saying, oh, my challenge is the hardest one, so I'm not going to do anything about it. The real question is, are you going to go? And I think that the other question from a little earlier was the imposter syndrome. I think they sort of relate, because the biggest way to grow while you're in law school is to put yourself out there in sort of situations that you haven't been in before. And so that you can grow, you can develop, and you can really build confidence. And that's going to be really important when you go for interviews, when you're speaking in court, when you're presenting at a meeting and things like that. Those are some of it's just like one aspect of yourself that you can work on in law school that's going to translate over any type of legal career. And going to these events where you're just like one law student and there's like an ocean of lawyers that seem to all know each other is difficult. But if you are strategic about it, if you say like, okay, tonight I'm going to make sure that I meet 2 random people, and then I can sort of like stand in the corner for a while. Just like go out and do that. And make those connections are going to be incredibly valuable. And I'll say that when you are a law student, there's going to be all types of people that are like excited to like get to know you and like mentor you and things like that. And if you're looking for mentors are people. And so you're going to have to go where there are other people. And if you're looking for like, you know, going to walk down the street and hope you run into a lawyer who's going to mentor you, like the chances of finding that person at one of these bar association things, where if it's like an affinity bar event, everyone shares some sort of like interest, it's a lot higher there. So I would say you have to decide for yourself whether going to these things where you have to drive on a weeknight and maybe give up something else and get home late and you have like a paper the next day, or you have a paper due in like 3 months. You have to decide whether you can like make that sacrifice. And I'll tell you that it is worth it. Some of these things, you're not going to find your great mentor the first time you go, but the more you do it, the more likely it is to happen.
That's great advice, Dan. And I think perfect timing. It is exactly 2 o'clock. And thank you so much to Dan. And now, of course, I've just forgotten everybody else who's here. Dan, Irene, Jimena, and Del Marina, thank you so much. And I'm going to hand it over to Anthony because it's time for us to meet the deans. So thank you so much, everybody.
Thank you for having us.
Terrific. Well, thanks again to our alumni panelists. That was fantastic. But for now, I'd like to transition over to our deans. We are excited to be joined by the deans of each of our respective law schools to give their remarks on the importance of diversity in legal education and the legal profession. I think we'll just go in the order that I have the names here on my screen. So Dean Sudasetti from Western New England University School of Law. If you would like to start us off, then we'll follow with Ebony Nelson, the Dean at UConn Law, Dean Lisa Freudenheim at New England Law Boston, and Dean Angela Nwachie-Willig at Boston University Law. So Dean Setti, if you could start us off, that would be great.
Terrific. Thank you, Anthony. And I'm so delighted to be in this conversation with all of you and with Deans Nelson, Freudenheim, and Nwachie-Willig. I think it's going to be a terrific discussion and I look forward to it. Let me start by what Anthony just said. The importance of diversity in law school and in the legal profession, I think, is paramount. And if anything has illustrated that to us in the last day, it is the historic path-breaking nomination of Judge Ketanji Brown Jackson to the Supreme Court. And the idea here of what diversity means in terms of not just representation, but in terms of lived experience, in terms of perspective, in terms of expertise, and judicial, jurisprudential formation that comes from a different perspective that's informed by something that frankly nobody else on the bench can bring, right? And how important that is to see on our Supreme Court. And that's reflected in every aspect of legal practice and in law schools as well. We talk a lot about the importance of diversity in law school because it is really fundamentally important. And it makes our law schools better. It makes us stronger. It makes us more thoughtful, engaged places to be and to think and to learn. But beyond that, what you all do when you join law school and when you join the legal profession is you help the legal profession get better. And we know that lawyers' job is to help, one of the fundamental jobs of lawyers is to help society become stronger and better and more just. And who better to bring those perspectives than the people who perhaps their paths have been different, or the ones that we don't historically see in our legal opinions or in the cases before us. And so you are bringing strength and perspective and an absolute talent and gift to the legal profession when you bring your perspectives and use the tools of law school to effectuate change in the world. So I encourage us all to think about it from that perspective. I caught the tail end of the last discussion where people were discussing the importance of mentoring and how important that is. Absolutely. But remember too, why those mentors are there as well, because you bring strength and you bring gifts to the legal profession that can make us all do a better job in law schools and as lawyers out to make change in the world. And so maybe I'll just start with that. I know, Anthony, you said I had 6 minutes to talk, but let's make it a conversation where we can encourage others to join in, because I think it's a wonderful time to really reflect on the strengths that all of us can bring to the legal profession and what it is that you can do by participating in this process and thinking through what law school means for you and beyond.
I think I'm up next. Thank you so much, Dean Setti. It's great to see you, Anthony. It's great to be with everyone. Great to be with my fellow deans. Dean Freudenheim, I don't think I've had the opportunity to meet you yet, so it's wonderful to meet you. Congratulations on your new position and your new role. And of course, it's wonderful to see Dean Onwuachi-Willig as well. Thank you all to the participants for being here today. And I will just pick back up where Dean Setti left off. Again, I too am riding the high and the joy that I feel with the historic moment that we had yesterday. And I'll tell you, for me, why it's so important. When you think about what lawyers do, when you think about what the skill set that you're going to be really developing in law school, lawyers are problem solvers. They are leaders. And so when you think about the Supreme Court and you think about those justices on the Supreme Court, they are leaders, not just in the judiciary, but in our society. And they are solving problems. They are identifying issues. They are looking at those issues and thinking about what that means for society. And so it's very important that the leaders of our society are coming from diverse backgrounds, because you're bringing that lived experience that no one else has. You look at those problems and you identify aspects of those problems that other people may not. And, you know, as you are doing that, you, as Dean Setti said, are really helping our country and our world as a whole to be better, because we are being more inclusive in the way we're identifying issues and identifying problems, and the ways that we are looking to resolve those problems, because we're not thinking about those problems just as they present in front of us. But diverse leaders, diverse law students, diverse advocates, diverse policymakers, all of which all of you will be one day, and probably in a lot of ways already are, you know, you're going to be looking at those problems and thinking about not just what the rules of the law happens to be, but also how the law is impacting aspects of our society. And we all know from our lived experiences that the law interacts with different people and different communities differently based on a whole host of factors, whether those factors are race, gender, sexual orientation, religious background and religious beliefs, gender diversity, fill in the blank. We know that the law impacts those communities differently. So it's important that we have representatives from those communities looking at these problems, looking at these issues, leading and advocating with regards to these issues. And so that is one reason, or a few reasons, why I think diversity in law schools and diversity in the legal profession is so important. And one final thing that I will say, and I'm sure you all have heard it before, but I think it's worth repeating. Representation does in fact matter. And I saw a wonderful, I'm new to the Twitter sphere. I'll be sure to put my Twitter handle in the chat. So please, all of you follow me at Twitter so I can get my, you know, followers up from 5 to maybe 10. But one of the things I saw this morning, and it said, you know, those who have a problem with a statement such as representation matters is probably because they're already well represented. And that just meant so much to me. And I thought that it just really encapsulates so much, and why yesterday meant so much to all of us, particularly to Black women, and particularly to girls and women of color, is because, again, we are not well represented on the Supreme Court. Of course, Black women are not represented at all on the Supreme Court currently, as a host of other people are not. But when we see that, it matters to us, because we know, again, that perspective, that lived experience that people from diverse backgrounds will come and bring with them as they look at these issues and make these policies and make these decisions. And so that representation matters. And so it will matter when you all are in law school. You will be looked to as role models, young boys and girls, and, you know, they will see you and they will think, oh, I too can go to law school, or I too can be a judge, or I too can be a congressperson. I too can achieve these things because I see people who look like me and from my communities doing that. So with that, I will pass the baton, but I'm so excited and congratulate all of you on your journey, which has really begun to becoming those wonderfully diverse leaders that we all need so much in our society and country right now.
Thank you so much, Dean Nelson. Dean Freudenheim, if you'd like to go next.
Thank you. Thank you all. As Dean Nelson mentioned, I'm very new to the role of dean. I think this is my 8th week. And I come from a background of academic support, which is a sort of unusual place to pluck a dean from, but it's a field dedicated to student success and recognizing a student experience in the classroom. And so for 20 years, I've been thinking about what it feels like in every individual space to sit in a classroom and to feel the mantle of the burden of your own success, but the success of those who are expecting a lot of you, the success you've got a lot riding on your shoulders. And so what we try to do, and one of the great things about law school now is I think that we are in a space where we're recognizing individuality and identity as absolutely essential to the classroom space and to the profession. And I see it in such a broad and encouraging way. I see it in terms of mental health and wellness, and I see it in terms of just people bringing their perspective and identity to how we understand issues, how we read cases, how we think about the impact on society of things that, quite frankly, 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 15 years ago, were not part of the conversation. So you have an incredible opportunity right now to be a part of a conversation where your perspective is incredibly important, and you've got to own that and know that. And so my academic support heart is full thinking about how you just are coming to law school at a really exceptional time to bring your identity, bring your questions. One of the things that I will say is that law school is really intimidating. And what I tell my students is that you don't have to be perfect, right? I don't care what burden you're holding, whether it's for yourself or for any broader group of people, or a couple people are counting on you. I was the first lawyer in my family. I was the first one to graduate from college. I felt an enormous amount of pressure and didn't know, what would it mean not to succeed? My first year, quite frankly, I think someone said this before, I was the 10% that made the top 90% possible, just to give you a sense of, so it was not an easy road at all. And I think that if you embrace the fact that this is a journey where you're going to learn and grow at your own pace, and to feel like you get to make mistakes and you don't have to be perfect, look for an environment where you feel you've got practice opportunities, where you can find support, a community of support. But most importantly, embrace your identity and be kind to yourself, because if you do that, you're going to be able to be in the space in law school in such an honest and authentic way that's going to benefit you and everyone else in that classroom. So congratulations on this incredible success. And I'm going to turn it over to Dean Onwuachi-Willig. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I too am riding on a high, like everyone else, from yesterday's nomination, which is a really inspiring moment for a really exceptional human being and exceptional judge and soon to be justice, hopefully. My name is Angela Onwuachi-Willig. I'm the Dean of Boston University School of Law and the Reinroth Gallo and Ernest J. Gallo Professor of Law. It's a nation's first endowed professorship in critical race theory. I first want to congratulate you on making the wise decision to attend the program. I think this day will give you a wonderful sense, and I hope it's already giving you a really wonderful sense of what it's like to be a law student. In law school, students, as you've seen so far, really get a chance to learn how to think like a lawyer. And that means a lot of different things, I'll say. And today you've gotten a small introduction to it, and the rest of the day you'll get continue to get an introduction to what it means to think like a lawyer. Law school is a huge investment financially, mentally, emotionally, and as I said before, you're very wise to learn more about law school before making such a huge investment. And I'll say that it's an investment that I believe it's really important to make. It's one that's worthwhile making. Diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging, which I don't think we talk about enough, are incredibly important for any law school. And even more to the point, they are incredibly important to the legal profession. The legal profession remains one of the least diverse professions in our country. According to a 2021 report from the American Bar Association, people of color comprise only 15% of the 1.3 million attorneys in the United States, whereas people of color comprise 40% of all US residents. This lack of full representation in the legal profession, as Dean Nelson pointed out, representation really matters. It really has far-reaching implications for equity and justice in our society. Lawyers have an incredible influence on how laws are created, how they're interpreted, how they're enforced. And when you don't have that kind of representation, as Dean Nelson pointed out, when it doesn't reflect society as a whole, laws are created, they're interpreted, and they're enforced without the benefit of a wide variety of perspectives and experiences from groups that have been traditionally underrepresented in our field. And I hope that when you join, and I know that when you join, you will add an incredible voice to and incredible perspectives that need to be added to our field. And in fact, the absence of your perspectives and so many of our perspectives really serves to reinforce the views of a very small privileged group, and it helps to perpetuate a cycle of inequality in all aspects of our justice system. I want to spend a little bit of time talking about Boston University School of Law. At Boston University School of Law, we're actively engaged in efforts to build an anti-racist culture within our community, and we want to grow a diverse pipeline of graduates in the legal profession. So as one example, among students who entered our JD program this fall, this past fall, 41% of those students identify as people of color. And that's up from the mid-20s just a few years prior. We're also offering new pipeline, what we call pipeline programs for law students or pre-law students from marginalized backgrounds. And I'll mention two in particular. The first program, the ASPIRE program, which stands for Anti-Racist Scholars for Progress, Innovation, and Racial Equity, is in partnership with BU's Center for Anti-Racist Research. It's a full tuition cohort, scholarship cohort program that's designed to prepare a new generation of legal scholars to advance the cause of equity and justice, and that intentionally integrates dialogue about bias and oppression into a variety of curricular and co-curricular activities. And the second is a summer pipeline program for college students of color and first generation students. It's a summer pre-law program that is really designed for people like you or college students. I'll talk a little bit too about, we have a long line of graduates too, but I want to say that one of the reasons why I think it's so important to be focused on diversity, equity, and inclusion is that lawyers are really people who make the world go round. Lawyers are people who work to ensure justice in our world. It's lawyers who are working to change law enforcement systems and practices that have led to police brutality against people of color, overcriminalization, and an unjust system of mass incarceration. It is lawyers who have worked to ensure that people have access to entry into our country. It's lawyers who fought to protect the rights of families of asylum seekers who were separated from each other at the border, and the rights of human trafficking survivors who've been criminalized through no fault of their own. It's lawyers who are trying to ensure that all kids have access to equal education, and who are working to ensure that we don't move to a system that takes money out of public schools that have already been stripped of so many resources. And it's lawyers who made the case that everyone who has a right to marry, everyone has a right to marry the person whom they love, and who are working to protect the trans community against harassment and discrimination. When I think about the work that lawyers do, I'm really so often reminded of what a noble profession I belong to, what a noble profession you would belong to if you decide to come to law school and become a lawyer. And it's a profession that really needs you now more than ever. So I sincerely hope you consider becoming a lawyer and that you apply to law school, and more so that you keep BU Law in mind when you do. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much, Dean and Wachi Willig. Dean Sethi, can I toss it back to you for a moment to talk about other initiatives at other law schools around diversity in legal education and the legal profession?
Well, maybe I'll just speak generally. So I think Dean and Wachi Willig highlighted some of the really terrific work that's going on at BU Law School. And I just want to emphasize to all of the folks who are participating here to really explore that at all of the law schools that you're considering, right? We represent 4 law schools, all of which have really terrific initiatives that we would encourage you to think about and learn about when it comes to not only building pipelines, but also the curriculum that we're offering and the support for folks entering the profession to do the type of work, the really important, crucial work that Dean Onwuachi-Willig highlighted. And so perhaps just in the interest of time, I would like to, encourage all of you to explore that and to talk to the admissions officers at all of our law schools about these initiatives and make sure that we have, I see that we have about 10 minutes left. So maybe we can just throw it to folks who have questions for us that we can respond to. But this has been so terrific to hear all of the deans speak.
Excellent. Thank you very much. And again, I encourage all of our guests to please type in any questions that you have into the Q&A feature at the bottom of your screen. And we're going to roll right into the longer Q&A that we have scheduled for the end of the programming. And we did actually have, while waiting for a question for the deans, we had a question before in the Q&A that I wanted to toss over to Dean Majorowski over at UConn Law. And this question is from Jace, who asks, how do admissions people at your school reconcile systematically minoritized groups having lower LSAT scores than other groups, but showcase them excelling within undergraduate and graduate coursework within their law school applications? Dean Majorowski, you want to talk about the holistic review process, perhaps?
Absolutely. Thank you, Anthony. And thank you, Jace, for that question. I'm going to answer it briefly first, and then I'll get a little bit further in. But the first thing I want you all to know out in the audience, you are more than your LSAT score. And hey, that rhymes. So that should be easy to remember. You are more than your LSAT score. So now for a little bit more of a thorough response. So I normally don't like to talk for anyone else, but I feel quite comfortable in at least talking for the colleagues that I'm on the panel with today in saying that all of our admissions offices take a holistic approach to the application review process. And what that means is there is no one factor that results in automatic admission or automatic denial. If it were just about the numbers, a computer could do our jobs. And I think that all of us do bring some value to what we do when we are going through an application review process. There are many things that can indicate your potential for success in law school outside of your LSAT score. Jace, embedded within your question, there were a few of them. We're looking at your academic trajectory, both in undergraduate and any postgraduate work that you've done. We're looking at your resume. We're looking at the level of involvement and engagement that you have with your communities. We are looking at your letters of recommendation. And even going further into your transcript, we're not just looking at that reported cumulative GPA. We're looking at the strength of the coursework. Did you challenge yourself? Even if, it was a B as opposed to an easy A class, if you challenged yourself, that says something because, oh boy, you've got some challenges coming in law school. I can tell you that in advance. And then just another kind of final note with respect to actually synthesize what all of our deans had mentioned. There is value in the perspective you're bringing. So again, you are not your LSAT score. You are the sum of your experiences. You are the sum of your intersecting identities. And that is what we're looking for at an admissions office to build our classes and build our communities. So again, you are not your LSAT score. We are going to take a holistic approach to that application review process. And so I do not want you to worry about, that LSAT score being that determining factor for your future.
Great, thank you very much for that answer. So while we're waiting for the next question to roll in, there was a question earlier that I want to toss over to Chloe about the Humphrey Fellowship, and I believe Boston University is a partner school for that program. So I just wanted to turn that over to Chloe to discuss that briefly.
Yeah, so I will be very brief and say that I'm going to put into the chat the information for our financial aid office, who will be able to give you the best and most accurate information. But we did have a question about the fellowship, which is an opportunity for international students. So definitely, if that is who you are, certainly As Lauren echoed, and I will say much more generally, perspective is a huge piece of this process. We have a joke in our office here. Our Dean of Admissions always says that when you walk home for Thanksgiving, your mom doesn't say, "Hi, 160 LSAT score," right? There's so much more to you than just any one number. And so that perspective is really important. Diversity of experience is really important to us. And so certainly if you are in a position where you're considering a fellowship like that, we definitely encourage you to explore those options. And I'm going to put into the chat, which I think everyone will be able to see, the contact info for our financial aid office, who can answer any more detailed questions.
Great, thank you very much. Before, I'm sorry, Dean Nelson, you had your hand up previously. Did you want to add on some comment to that previous answer?
No problem. Yes, I would. And I really appreciate the question about the LSAT score. And I greatly appreciate Dean Majorowski's and Dean Matthews' responses to that. But I think it's worth, just really hammering home what they said about you're not your score. Not just that you're not more, you're more than your score. You're actually not your score, right? So whether it is a 141 or 171, it is a snapshot of how someone did in 3 hours, right? But thinking about what you've done over 3 years, 4 years of undergraduate, or even more than so with graduate work, as the deans have already said, that really plays a part. I was someone who went into college knowing that I don't perform well on standardized tests. I did not do, extraordinarily well on the SAT. And I, thought that I was probably not going to do, extraordinarily well on the LSAT. And so I wanted to make sure that I had that higher GPA to kind of balance that out. But I think it's really important because I do know that, we hone in on those types of scores, whether it's the GPA or the LSAT. But I think it's important, as Dean Setti was saying, to reach out to your admissions officers of the schools you're interested in, and don't just look at the published, this is the median LSAT, right? Because when you think about this is the median LSAT or this is the median GPA, that means 50% are above that and 50% are below that. So reach out to your admissions officers and ask them, what is the range of scores that you have admitted in the past year or 2 years, so that you can see, even if you may be slightly below that median, you're really well within the range, so that you should go ahead and apply to that school. Oftentimes we, as people of color, we will self-select ourselves out of opportunities because we see some objective criteria and think that, I don't meet that. And so, that's not going to be an opportunity that I should go for. And we do that when we think about, what's published out there about LSAT scores and GPAs. But I do encourage you to go and ask those questions about the range. But again, it's also just not about that, right? Again, ask these questions about the great programs that the schools have, what the leadership of the schools look like, how committed are they, to issues of diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging, the faculty, the staff members, other students. Do your homework. Don't just depend on those kind of quote unquote objective criteria of US News and things like that, so that you really find yourself in a place that feels like home to you and that's going to be supportive of you. But I know, again, we hone in on that LSAT score, we hone in on that GPA, we start self-selecting ourselves out. Don't make that same mistake that so many of us do with regards to that.
Great, thank you very much. The next question that we have in the Q&A from Cassius: are older non-traditional applicants viewed differently as opposed to kindergarten through law school applicants? If I can toss that over to Anne, if you want to tackle that question.
Sure, that was an ideal question. I was actually an older applicant. I was actually in my 40s when I decided to go to law school. And I can say, so I can speak to both sides. As an older applicant, I was very nervous. I was very nervous about my age, the fact that I had children. I didn't have anyone at home to help me with the children while I was in law school. And on this side, now that I'm here, which I love, I think I feel as an admissions officer a particular affinity and desire to reach out and help anyone who is older, not older as a, like not objectively old, but older than, the traditional law school age. And I think that that's probably true for any admissions officer, that all applications are viewed holistically in terms of the person applying, not someone else. So if I look at the application of someone who's, say, the same age I was when I applied, there's a moment of joy. Yes, you can do it. And then there's also this, my usual, which is, okay, this is a very interesting person. Look at all of these things this person has done, and look at the determination it takes for this person to step out of the normal range of activity for someone in their 40s and apply to intimidating law school and start a new career, or maybe branch out from their current career. So sure, differently in that I do look at the applications differently, in that I think I'm going to really pay attention to this person's history, maybe more than I would for someone whose history is a lot shorter, but all good, all great.
Great,
If I could just, go ahead, Anthony, I'll just add on, just in terms of logistics for that question. For example, many law schools, almost every single law school in the country is going to require letters of recommendation as part of your application packet to law school. And so one differential that you may find yourself facing as a non-traditional student, someone who's been out of school for a little while, you'll see that a lot of law schools are seeking academic letters of recommendation. So these are letters of recommendation coming from professors who have had you in class. Well, if you've been out of school for 15 years or 20 years, you may have a hard time going back and being able to find an academic source for a letter of recommendation. In those cases, don't sweat it. Again, to that holistic application review process that each of our offices and most offices in this country engage in, we understand that human element. When I left college, I'd be hard pressed after 3 years to find a faculty member who remembered me. So, if it's been some time since you've been out of school, there isn't necessarily that expectation that you'll be submitting an academic letter of recommendation. And also similarly, if you have a GPA that was earned 10, 15 years ago, in my mind, when I'm reviewing an application, that plays a little less than someone who has just recently graduated college, maybe even last year. And so their GPA is fresh and perhaps a more accurate representation of who they are as a student right now in this moment. So there are differences in how I believe all of our admissions offices consider what our industry calls a non-traditional student, someone who's been out of school for a little while. But most of them will play to the benefit of understanding that, hey, you're a human, you have progressed since you've been in school. So let's take a deeper dive into looking at what you've done since school has been over.
Anthony, I wonder if I could just jump in really briefly here and just to build on these comments, and goes back to something that Dean Nelson and others talked about earlier. I also would not view your experience out as being, applying at a different time or phase in your life as a negative, right? Again, what we're talking about is the importance of people's lived experience to help diversify law school and the legal profession. By being someone who's been out in the world doing whatever it is that you have been doing, you are bringing a different perspective and a different lived experience to law school. You're helping make law schools better and more thoughtful in the way we engage in conversation because of that. And, speaking personally as a teacher, when I have students who have lots of experience doing different things, they enrich the classroom conversation tremendously. So view that as a strength when you go into the application process as well, right? It's not just that, the recommendations piece and whatever else might look a little bit different than it might for a student who goes straight through. I like the question framing it as K through college or whatever, K through law school. But view yourself as bringing strength about who you are and what you have done into that application process and into your life as a law student and as a lawyer.
Great. And I see that Del Marina Lopez, our student panelist from the previous session, was able to join us for the Q&A, and she has her hand raised right now. So Del Marina, do you want to contribute to this conversation?
Yeah, sure. So I actually wanted to make a comment similar to Dean Studies, and I think as a K through law school applicant, which is what I was, I really valued the insight and experience that like the non-traditional older students brought to the classroom. I think I actually gravitated more towards them. They usually were the most dedicated students. They were the ones that were really there because they had made like an adult decision to be there. Not to say that we're not adults at our age. I mean, we are, but it's very different when you come in after, you had maybe another career or children, and you decide that this is the path you want to take on. They take it serious in a different manner. And they were the best study buddies. They were the best people to migrate around when it was time for exams. And like, if you had questions, oftentimes they had done 3 times the research on that question, because for them, like they were just a plethora of knowledge, and or they might have had like real world experience. A lot of them were paralegals or like did work in the field. So not only do I like urge anyone who's not a traditional student to apply to law school, but know that like your role in the classroom is vital, and it really adds to the experience.
Terrific. Thank you, Del Marina. We have another question in the Q&A, which on its face is a perfect admissions question. And I believe myself and all of my colleagues have strong feelings about this, but I want to flip the script and get the deans back in on the conversation as well and pose it to them first. So Joshua asks, do you think the LSAT score should become less used as a metric for grading a person on doing well in law school, like how some schools are now taking the GRE instead? Any thoughts on that? Who would like to kick us off? Dean Freudenheim?
Sure. I think the admissions process it's an imperfect science, right? We're trying to figure out how to get to know you and your potential and the fit. And, personally, I think anything that is a standardized test, has limitations and flaws. So whether it's the LSAT or the GRE, or any numerical, deductive, reductive way of defining an applicant is flawed. And so I think that part of the admissions process, and one of my things in my new role, is to really get to understand who our applicants are. And so to that end, think of this as a holistic application and know that we are trying to get to know you. I get that numbers can really oversimplify and tell only a part of the story. So it's certainly something that we're going to continue to try to get other information about who you are and how we might be the right fit for you. Again, just to talk about, if you are someone whose LSAT wasn't, you don't feel as a reflection of your potential, well, you could think about what support you're going to need when you get to law school. What are the scaffolding that you're going to need, if at all, or and think about really what you bring, what you uniquely bring. I love the word grit and resilience, and I love to see that in an application. There are times when we are really looking for someone's sense of self and potential and vision. So all of that is important, and know that numbers game is really just it's a part of it, but we all recognize, I don't want to speak for my colleagues, but I think we recognize the flaw in it. And I can tell you there are students whose metrics would suggest that they are going to do really well and don't. And then there are many students who outperform their indicators, and we're fully aware of that. So it's just trying to, for us, anything you can do to help us get a sense of you and who you are and what you bring to the plate will be helpful.
I'll join in there too. I'll say a couple of things. I'll say one of the things that, first I'll tell you one of the reasons why all schools use the LSAT, and then I'll offer my opinion about it. So I think one of the reasons why all schools use the LSAT is that we're all required by the American Bar Association, which is our accrediting association, to use a test that is known or has been tested for predicting performance performance in law school. And the LSAT is one school that has been validated as predicting at least performance partially in the first year, or some percentage of performance in the first year. And so that's why we use it. I think many schools, if they weren't required to use it, might not use it. And I think that what I'll say is that the Law School Admissions Council makes quite clear that they think that schools overuse it in the admissions process, and schools overuse it for all kinds of structural reasons, and including US News rankings. And so that I'll put that out there as an explanation. And then I'll say, like everyone else has said so far, I think it is overused in the admissions process, that people are far more than, people are not their scores, right? As Dean Nelson said. But I think the advice is, how do you think about, if you think your score doesn't represent who you are, or you think it might be given too much weight in your process, how do you think about, how do you tell your narrative and your story so you can counter it? So one thing is, as Dean Nelson pointed out, was, if you're having a really high GPA is one way to counter it, right? But another way is through parts of your application, right? So explicitly saying, I've never been a strong test taker, but it's never been anything that's predicted my performance in the past, right? Maybe it's part of an explanation that you give as a small or short essay in your application. You can have your references speak directly to it. I always ask my references to give me a story about it, and maybe part of your story is that standardized tests have never been a predictor for your actual performance in school and the actual things that you contribute to the communities that you give. And so think about the kinds of narratives and where you tell those narratives in your application, how you can speak to an LSAT score that you think doesn't represent your abilities when you're applying to law school.
Great, thank you. The next question that we have in is from Sydney. Sydney asks, could it be considered a strike against an applicant if they say they have good grades and LSAT score, but it took them more than 4 years to get their undergraduate degree? Does one of my colleagues want to be the first to jump in and answer this question?
I'm happy to kick us off since it's an admissions-based question. Sydney, we're going to look at each applicant on a case-by-case basis, and there is no standard kind of checkbox or checklist that I'm looking for when I'm going through an application. I'm not approaching the application review process saying, graduated in 4 years, check, or president of the Pre-Law Society, check. What I have found in my role now for the past 8-9 years going on in admissions is that, there's no one right way to law school. In fact, in some ways, all roads lead to law school, perhaps maybe except a life of crime. That wouldn't be the road to take to law school. But outside of that, there are so many different ways to get to law school. And, if there is something that needs to be explained about your application as to, it's unclear why it took more than 4 years for you to complete your degree, that is a perfect opportunity for a supplemental statement known as an addendum. An addendum, every law school in the country will accept it. It's a little bit like what I call the secret menu item. It may not be published as one of the required components, but it is something that enables you to add context to what you may feel is a perceived deficit in your application. Let's say you started off with a rocky GPA and then you pulled it up. If you have something to explain in the background that isn't evident to the admissions committee when they're reviewing that, perfect time for an addendum. Same thing, it took you more than 4 years to graduate because there was something going on in the background. Again, if we can't tell what that was, perfect place for an addendum. So addenda, very valuable application tool in order to provide context for some things that may not make sense or may be seen as a perceived deficit in your application file.
I just wanted to co-sign to all of that. I think it's very important to give the committee that context that they wouldn't have otherwise. And in fact, we will reach out to you if there is a gap in your education history or in your work history that's not explained on the application. So it is a good idea to be proactive in giving that context to the committee with that short addendum. So I completely agree.
Anthony, I'll just add in one thing, and this is perhaps a bit tangentially related about addenda. Yes, echo and cosign all of the things that you just said. It is, we joke that we have very vivid imaginations. And so if there is something, there is a hole, a gap, something unexplained in your application, it is 100% always best for you to explain it to us instead of us imagining what that scenario might be. That being said, I do think that you want to use your addenda wisely. Sometimes I feel like I read a great application, I get to the end of the application, and then there are 7 different addenda, and it's like, wait, don't talk me out of admitting you, right? I thought you were doing great here. And so you just want to think through, using your application space, the valuable real estate, and what is a admittedly very small picture of you and your entire life to really advocate for yourself. And I think that oftentimes, applicants think of things in their application as perceived deficits that the admissions committee might not think so. And so just, using that space wisely, like I said, it is, as Anthony echoed, really helpful for us to get additional information about you and your background and situations that we wouldn't be able to see from your transcripts or things like that. But also just keeping in mind that you want to advocate for yourself in the best way possible.
Great. Dean Unwachi-Willig?
I think Dean Freudenheim had her hand up ahead of me. If you want to go, okay. I was just going to add a comment and say it's very much related to the addendum comment that Ms. Matthews highlighted. And what I would say is that I think I'd also think about how do I include that as part of the story? I mean, think of your entire application as a narrative that you're telling about yourself and the story that you're telling about yourself. And so, does it say, I mean, I think Dean Freudenheim pointed out earlier, and Dean Teddy brought it up earlier when she's talking about being a non-traditional student is, what is, you're taking 4 years. It's not just simply that you're explaining it, but this demonstrates something about you, right? The challenge that you faced earlier that resulted in you taking a longer period of time than the standard period to finish college, that say something about grit and resilience and something that you would bring to law school. I mean, so think about how that fits in the overall narrative and the picture that you're presenting in your application. And so that's one way to approach it too. It doesn't have to be an addendum explanation. It could be part of the entire picture you're presenting, is what I would say.
I just had a small comment too that sort of relates to some work that Dean Unwachi-Willig and I are doing on a subcommittee on character and fitness, which has to do with the fact that I don't think you should count yourself out because you haven't had a perfect, you're perfect. You haven't been perfect. You might have a track record where you've had things that you might not feel great about. They could be criminal offenses. They could be situations at work. I think you really have to think about how you reacted to those situations. Be candid on an application and don't count yourself out. We're looking in Massachusetts at our standards for character and fitness because it's so important that we're not all starting in the same place. And we know that more important than any mistake anybody makes is how they respond to it and what they do to move forward. And some of my favorite lawyers have the most interesting past. Some of my favorite students have stories that are just heartwarming and that show that resilience and show that, yeah, they weren't perfect. And but you don't have to be. You just have to be able to kind of know where you are right now and be candid and honest and own that part of yourself and know that there's going to be a place for you if there's there's a right place for you. So.
Anne?
Just wanted to make a quick comment about being proud of who you are as an authentic person. So not just how you fit into a larger societal discussion of identity, but really what's been going on with you? Who are you as a person? I'm so interested to know. I really am. Every time I read an application in which someone has been kind enough to reveal who they really are, I don't expect a particular ending to the story or a particular beginning or a particular middle. I just want to know what happened and what you're doing, what you've been doing, and why you want to be a lawyer. And that authenticity, I think, is more important than some of the advice that I've seen both, before I was a law student and now, which is sort of everybody tell the same story, structure it the same way, open it like this or that. To me, and maybe this is only me, but I don't think so. To me, what's important is really having a sense of what your journey is, what you want it to be, and how our law school or any law school can help you get there. And that to me is the most important holistic element. Well, it's not, maybe not the most, to me it is. And then, of course there are the other things, but don't be afraid to be who you are, and don't get too wound up about the books that say start like this, middle like this, end like that.
Great. This next question, I think I'd like to take the first stab at, but I invite my colleagues to jump in as well. So Elijah's asking about how to compare law schools based on their academics other than using US News and World Report. So I'll start by saying that US News and World Report is, in my opinion, of limited utility, right? We love to rank things as a society. You see lists of everything, top 10 this, top 100 that. It doesn't tell you that much. So unfortunately, in terms of answering that question, it does take a little bit of a deeper dive into perhaps the websites of our law schools, calling up the admissions offices, talking about what kind of programs do they offer in terms of clinics and externships. Do they have the concentrations that interest you? It does take that kind of legwork to do. If you're interested more in looking at just hard stats, I really do recommend the ABA 509 reports. If you're not familiar with those, the American Bar Association has a standard that all law schools have to publicize information in the same standard way, so you as the educational consumer can compare apples to apples. So I'm going to drop that link in the chat so you can check out the ABA 509 reports and again, look at those stats head to head. But I really do encourage you to, besides looking at the law school websites, call us up in the admissions office. We love having these conversations about our unique programs that we have to offer to help you make that important decision. Del Marina?
Yeah, I think just from the recent student perspective, I think when I was making my decision, something that was really helpful for me was creating an Excel sheet. And on that Excel sheet, I had two different tabs. The first one was just like a regular tracker. And I had listed in order the schools that I was interested in by order of rank of like just me. And I listed pros and cons on different columns. And then in those same columns, I did list the scholarships as they came in as well. And so then on the second tab, once all the scholarships had come in, I had duplicated that tab and then organized it by the scholarships. And I think, so part of the decision-making for me at least was money absolutely mattered. I'm not a trust fund baby, unfortunately. So I had to, make a decision that was financially viable for myself. And so that's not just looking at scholarship amounts. I also had a tab for cost of living in certain areas. So for example, I had a full ride in California, but a full ride in California doesn't actually mean you're graduating without loans, because housing in California is much more expensive than housing would have been if I had stayed at Western New England and could live at home with my parents. So all of those things I had tracked on an Excel sheet, and it was the only way that I could look at it all at once and just kind of look at it for what it was. Otherwise, it became really overwhelming. So I encourage folks to, if you're in the process of trying to decide which law school you want, create some system that allows you to see all the information at once objectively, and try to take the feelings out of it for a second, but then put the feelings back. So Western New England at first, in all honesty, and I've said this before and Anthony knows, was not my first choice. I was like, there's no way I'm staying home for law school. But then when I went to the school, I was able to add a lot more to the pros list. I fell in love with the clinical programs that they had there. Some of the professors, they were really smart to put on the best professors during Accepted Student Day, and I fell in love with the program. So that added to the pros list. And then I was also able to, you know, go back, once you have all that information in front of you, you can go back and talk to the law schools if they're not giving you enough money, and just be frank with them. Say like, you know, I like your program, but like all of these schools, I can provide you with my financial aid packages if you want. They're much higher. What can we do? But I really recommend finding some system, whether it's Excel or however it is that works best for you, a diagram, something that helps you understand the information all at once.
Terrific. Thank you, Del Marina. And I should mention too that Del Marina, as a busy councilwoman, is traveling between events right now, which is why she's not on camera, because she's in the car. We do appreciate you being here and offering that insight. It's very, very helpful.
Thank you for having me. Sorry that I'm in the car.
No problem. We're happy to have you. So not seeing any additional questions in the Q&A and no other hands up from my fellow panelists, I just wanted to thank all of you attending today for taking the time to hear from our presenters, and thank our wonderful presenters as well for their time and imparting all of this very important information. And again, this is the start of the conversation. We're happy to continue the conversation down the road. We put our contact info in the chat, so please do feel free to reach out. But until those next conversations, thank you once again and enjoy the rest of your Saturday.